Hey guys, picture this. Flickering lanterns casting dancing shadows on crimson velvet drapes, the muffled laughter of noblemen cloaked in heavy brocade, and the unmistakable scent of clove and wine mingling with something far less refined. You're about to step into a world where pleasure and peril waltz cheek to cheek, and spoiler alert, you might not live to tell the tale. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Part 1. A Night at the Red Door. Madonna mia, you whisper under your breath as you approach the narrow cala, its crooked houses looming like silent sentinels. The moon, cheeky as ever, peeks through wisps of cloud, illuminating a single scarlet door set beside a peeling fresco of Venus herself. Anyone else might mistake it for an innocuous entryway to a tailor's workshop, or better yet, the storage for someone's moldy cabbages. But you, dear viewer, you know better. As you lift the iron ring door knocker, every breath you take feels borrowed from some other, braver soul. Your hand trembles because, let's be honest, the only thing more terrifying than visiting a brothel in Renaissance Venice is admitting to your friends that you visited a brothel in Renaissance Venice. The door swings open without a sound, revealing a corridor lit by oil lamps so dim they might as well be candles on their last legs. You're greeted by the Madame, La Signora Rosetta, her cheeks painted as pink as the freshly slaughtered carp at Rialto Market, her eyes sharp enough to fillet said fish. She sizes you up with a practiced glance that says she's seen your type before. Wide-eyed, expecting romance and clinging to a shred of dignity, she ushers you inside. Now, let's pause for context. In 16th century Venice, brothels were not hidden dens of sin condemned to plague and ruin, but rather legally sanctioned establishments carefully monitored by the state. The Council of Ten, the city's oh-so-pleasant secret police, issued licenses, regulated prices, ensured the professionals were vaccinated against syphilis, as much as one could vaccinate against a disease so fresh it was still finding its feet, and, of course, collected their tribute in ducats. You step into the main salon and are struck immediately by the decor. Tapestries depicting bacchanalian revelries, plush velvet cushions stuffed so generously you could drown in them, and portraits of famous courtesans whose reputations have echoing musée volumes in every gondola and palace. It's like Versailles got compressed into a gondola cabin, luxury squeezed into a confined space, and you, poor tourist, are the melon wedged between the cushions. La Signora Rosetta waves for you to sit on an opal blue settee. With a flourish, she produces a menu not of wines or cheeses, but of women. Each listing is more tempting than the last. Isabella, expert in Venetian whispering, 40 soldi per quarter hour. Caterina, specialist in Moorish dances, 50 soldi. Francesca, rumored to have charmed Doge himself, priceless. Your purse sighs in agony as you contemplate these prices. You extract a few coins, fearing the purse will bill you for an emotional therapy session later. Choosing a companion is like picking a horse at the races. You look for the one with the best pedigree, the most promising trot, and the least chance of tripping you into a ditch. Eyes flicker over descriptions of hair like raven wings, laughter like tinkling bells, and eyes that promise secrets best kept unspoken. After what feels like an eternity, you settle on Bianca. Her profile boasts affable conversation and gentle manners, which, to you, reads like, won't talk your ear off about Platonic philosophy at midnight. You're shown through a narrow corridor, past bolted doors to a private chamber. The walls are lined with damask, the floor strewn with well-worn rugs, and a small brazier in the corner crackles with sandalwood chips. Light dances in patterns across the ceiling, as though the flames are performing for your amusement. You've barely had time to breathe when Bianca appears, candlelight haloing her silhouette. She greets you with a curtsy so crisp it could slice through your anxiety. Buonasera, signore, she purrs, voice soft as spun silk. And just like that, you feel like a medieval peasant on the brink of discovering cheese for the first time. You stumble through your introduction, attempting Italian you learned from a drunken gondolier, while Bianca offers you a goblet of watered-down wine. It tastes like sadness and regret, but you raise it anyway, because manners dictate that you toast before making any life-altering decisions. As you sip, Bianca sits beside you on the edge of a broad bed draped in scarlet linens. The sheets look as soft as a cloud, but promise to be stickier than a barrel of honey. You engage in polite chatter, her voice rhythmic, almost hypnotic. She asks where you're from. You hesitate, because small town near nothing doesn't exactly scream interesting conversationalist. You settle on Paris, hoping she doesn't quiz you on the recent Pont Neuf renovations. Conversation flows, or rather trickles, like a leaky cistern. She asks if you'd like anything else. More wine, a song, maybe a dance? You consider dancing, but recall that your limbs are better suited to standing rigidly in chalk lines. So you opt for wine, boldly asking for a refill. The second cup hurts your head but soothes your tongue, paving the way for more intimate discussions. Bianca whispers tales of her own, the cruelty of a jealous patron, the kindness of a wealthy merchant who slipped her extra coins, the nightly inspections by the council's physician. She speaks of syphilis as casually as one would mention the common cold. Just a nuisance, really, if you have the ducats to treat it. Every anecdote peels away another layer of the brothel's illusion of genteel amusement, revealing the grit, vulnerability, and occasional violence that lurks beneath. Then comes the moment you've been waiting for. Bianca stands and extends her hand, beckoning you closer. You comply like a soldier marching to certain doom, part excitement, part cowardice. Her touch is light, teasing, tracing the collar of your doublet. Your heart thumps so loudly you half expect it to wake the Doge himself. As she presses her lips to your neck, you marvel at the absurdity of it all. A noble act of desperation disguised as pleasure, performed for the high price of a few coins. Your mind spins as senses collide. The faint crackle of the brazier, the clinking of coins in your pocket, the taste of that cursed wine, the softness of silk against your fingertips. And just when you think you might survive this medieval dance of desire, you remember the world outside. Gondolas gliding silently through murky canals, masked courtiers whispering secrets in smoky alleys, the plague still lingering in every breath of Venetian air. Because here's the brutal truth. Visiting a Renaissance brothel is more than a quest for carnal relief. It's a gamble with fortune and fate. Syphilis looms like a specter, Cristo ready to claim your jaw. Thieves watch from the shadows, eager to relieve you of your purse while you're otherwise occupied. And the Council of Tens tax collectors won't hesitate to haul you off if you forget their coins on the table. All this crosses your mind in the few breathless seconds before Bianca's fingers curl in your hair. You steady yourself, resolve flickering like the lantern in the hall. This is your moment, an absurd, ironic plunge into the heart of Venice's most sanctioned sin. You lean in, determined to taste history, quite literally, while reminding yourself that tomorrow you'll need to explain why your mustache is perpetually damp and why rumors of your nocturnal escapade drift through every osteria in town. And as Bianca closes in, you brace for impact. Part 2. Dawn of regret and hidden debts. You limp out of Bianca's chamber just as pale gray light begins to seep beneath the scarlet door. Your head pounds like a timpani, your purse feels embarrassingly light, and you suspect your dignity was left behind on that damask-strewn bed. But hey, nobody ever said survival in the Renaissance was dignified. By the time you reach the cala, the first gondoliers are hauling their boats from the water, each one yawning as if personally affronted by the sunrise. A solitary gull squawks overhead, mocking your bleary-eyed stumble. You clutch the neck of a cheap wine bottle, you know, the one Bianca graded as passable, and take another swig. It tastes like fermented regret, but at least it numbs your worry that you'll owe La Signora Rosetta more than just coins. Your legs wobble as you mount the first bridge you see, probably the Bridge of Sighs, though at this point every bridge in Venice looks like the sort of architectural chokehold that inspired Dante's Lower Circles. You pause halfway across, leaning on the stone parapet, because gravity is still doing overtime, reminding you that late-night escapades have side effects. Below, canal water glints like spilled mercury. You imagine syphilis bacteria drifting in the depths, eager to hitch a ride up your bloodstream. Charming. A passing gondolier tips his hat, a sarcastic gesture, no doubt, and you nod back as if you're too noble to ride without purse. He quips, "Good morning, signore. Rough night?" You consider replying with a witty quip of your own, but decide that collapsed dignity doesn't need further compound interest. Instead, You mumble something about just the usual Venetian hospitality and keep moving. Your first order of business faced the Council of Ten's tax collector. You didn't forget them, did you? Of course not. As you approach the ornate facade of the Palazzo Ducal, you rehearse your defense, plead ignorance, accuse Bianca of misleading pricing, insist you thought soldi meant small ducks. None of these strategies will work, but practicing shame-fueled speeches is oddly therapeutic. Inside, the collector, a gaunt man with eyes so hollow you could fill them with Venetian lagoon water, presents the bill. 40 lire for the room, 30 soldi for the wine, an additional 15 soldi for the council's 2% service fee. He taps the parchment, eyes glittering with bureaucratic glee. You hand over the last of your coins, listening to each ducat clink as it slides across the table. You're now officially bankrupt in both coin and self-respect. With your pockets echoing emptiness, you emerge back into the morning bustle. Merchant stalls are opening, fish guts piled high, leather workers sanding sandals, and vendors hawking soggy focaccia. It's as if the city itself insists you keep moving, lest you collapse on the stones and join the dog turds in permanent residency. Next on your agenda, find rosemary. Legend has it that rubbing rosemary oil on your body wards off unpleasant infections and, apparently, bad decisions. You locate a herb seller whose booth is fragrant enough to mask last night's eau de brothel. He eyes your bedraggled appearance and offers you a sprig for a single denaro. You pay and promptly rub the oil into your wrist, heart, and temples, hoping to massage away the haunting creak of your own mortality. As you walk, memories from the night before play on loop, each more mortifying than the last. The way Bianca's eyebrow arched when you mispronounced grazi, the thud of your purse as it tumbled off the settee, that fleeting moment when you genuinely considered trying Moorish dance. Thankfully, you did not. Each recollection is a sharpened note in a symphony of shame. A sudden clatter pulls you from your reverie. A group of masked courtiers waltzes past, their silken robes brushing the ground. They look like a traveling plague of aristocracy, and you wonder if any of them also paid a visit last night. Did they laugh at your tipsy Spanish accent? Did they leave with less in their purse than you did? The thought comforts you slightly, because misery loves company, especially if that company wears velvet cloaks and carries ornate fans. Your next stop is an osteria recommended by a friendly drunk. Supposedly, their polenta is so thick it could double as medieval armor, and their coffee, if you're feeling extravagant, will stir you awake without the need for resurrection rites. You squeeze into the crowded hall, where sailors swap sea serpents' tails and merchants haggle over the price of olive oil. You shuffle to the counter and order a bowl of polenta and a small mug of the black brew. Liquid clarity, or so they claim. The polenta arrives steaming like molten gold. You stab it with your spoon, sending up clouds of semolina dust that cling to your eyelashes. The first mouthful is gritty, gluey, and exactly what your body needs to remember it's still alive. Then comes the coffee, bitter, volcanic, and so potent that you swear you can see the canal swirling back into order. You sip it slowly, envisioning your bloodstream clearing out every vestige of last night's folly. Fueled by polenta and caffeine, you set out to immortalize your adventure in writing, because nothing says I'm a civilized human like journaling your own humiliation. You find a bench overlooking a busy canal and produce a scrap of parchment and quill. Your entries read like a cautionary tale. July 8th in the year of our Lord, 1523. Approached a scarlet door under false pretenses of culture. Handed over coins as though they were confetti. Auris engaged in conversation with Bianca, whose charm rivals Pontius Pilate's indifference. Mistakenly referred to syphilis as that lovely new rash. Left with nothing but a lighter purse and heavier conscience. By the time you finish, half the ink has dried in blotches. You crumple the parchment into a ball and toss it into the canal, hoping it floats away to warn some poor soul, or at least mulch into fish food. But just as you rise to leave, the grand organ bells of St. Mark's rattle the sky. It's midday, which means one thing. The city's elite are filing into the piazza, eager to display their finery and gossip about last night's rumored affairs. You blend into the crowd, pulling your cloak's hood up, imagining you're an inconspicuous shadow. Suddenly, a voice calls out your name. You turn, and there stands a fellow traveler you met at the brothel's anteroom, a boisterous Swiss mercenary named Klaus, who brags he once survived a siege by eating his own bootlaces. "Ah, my friend," he roars, clapping you on the back with such force that you spill your coffee. "Wasn't that place something else? I'll never forget Lucrezia's rendition of Greensleeves. She had pipes on her. Pipes, I tell you." You stare, mouth agape. You'd forgotten that before Bianca, you'd overheard Klaus waxing poetic about the pipes. Your brain scrambles. Do you pretend to share his enthusiasm or confess that Lucrezia's pipes sounded more like a wheezy goat? You opt for diplomatic silence and a weak nod. He laughs heartily, slaps more coins into the gutter-drained canal, and vanishes into the throng. Now you face a choice: continue drowning in nostalgia, or press on toward a more productive endeavor, like borrowing enough ducats for dinner, or perhaps applying for a loan from that shady moneylender who always seems to pop up when you're near his stall. But before you can decide, a flash of crimson catches your eye. La Signora Rosetta herself, gliding across the piazza with the confidence of a queen and the smile of someone who knows exactly where your next ducat is hiding. "Signor," she coos, enclosing you in her perfumed orbit, "I trust you enjoyed your evening." Her tone is sweet enough to trap flies. You manage a nod. "Excellent. I have a proposition for you. A private gathering for a select clientele, special rates, exclusive company. Interested?" Your pulse triples. You glance at your empty purse, then at her expectant gaze. You suddenly understand why Venice thrives on its reputation for refined debauchery. The real profit comes not from fleeting pleasure, but from the endless promise of more. Once you've sampled the poison, you're forever thirsting for another sip. You bow your head. "Perhaps in a few days," you say, hoping to sound ceremonious rather than pathetic. She smiles, knowing the truth. You'll return. Everyone does. With that, you slip away, into the winding maze of alleys, your heart thudding a rhythm of reluctant anticipation. Because here's the twist of this Renaissance nightmare. You despise every decadent second, but you can't help craving the next. The pain of survival in the past isn't just physical, it's a hunger that only the city's most sanctioned sins can soothe. And as you vanish into the Venetian labyrinth, you realize that this brothel trip was never about carnal release or even historical curiosity. It was about confronting your own foolishness, your willingness to gamble on fleeting thrills in exchange for a story so ludicrous it might just keep the audience glued to the screen. So, dear viewer, when you click away from this video, remember, the red door awaits, and the cycle of absurdity and ducats turns ever on. Part 3, Masks, Murders, and Midnight Musings. The gondolas have slipped back into the shadows by the time you rouse yourself from a nap in a murky alley. Proof that, in Venice, even your unconsciousness demands a gondola service. You rub your temples, wondering if you finally banished the echo of La Signora Rosetta's laughter, or if it's simply hitting replay on some cursed Venetian phonograph. The moon hangs low and bloated in the sky, like a judgmental eye waiting to witness your next folly. You decide discretion is the better part of valor, at least until tomorrow morning. Tonight, your plan is to explore the darker corners of the brothel district, scout potential escape routes, and perhaps, just perhaps, find someone willing to barter a candle for a story of your shame. You slink along the canals, cloak drawn tight, each narrow street looking as treacherous as a lover's promise. Suddenly, you hear muffled sobs. Peering around a corner, you spot a figure curled against a damp wall, clutching a torn tunic and trembling like a newborn foal. It's Giovanna, a young courtesan you met briefly in the corridors of La Signora Rosetta's establishment. Her mascara-streaked cheeks glisten in the lamplight, and her voice quavers as she recounts her latest heartbreak. A patrician who promised marriage, then vanished faster than his ducats. How tragic, you think, the words slipping out before you can stop them. Giovanna flinches, mistaking your sarcasm for sympathy. You awkwardly offer a handkerchief, embroidered with your initials naturally, because nothing says "I come bearing help" like a gift with your name on it. She accepts it, sniffles, and you manage a weak nod before shuffling away, heart somehow heavier than your empty purse. As you continue, you notice the pace of the district shift. Masks replace bare faces, and hushed voices trade secrets behind latticed windows. You spot a discreet sign, 2 crossed fan handles, indicating an elite salon reserved for the city's most exclusive clientele. You press your ear to the door and overhear a low-voiced conversation. A senator discussing the Doge's rumored affair, a merchant plotting the downfall of a rival, and a foreign ambassador complaining about the quality of Venice's walnuts. This, dear viewer, is where the real entertainment lies. In a city that thrives on spectacle, the greatest show is the theater of gossip and politics, even more so when coated in the veneer of silk and secrecy. You resist the urge to knock and demand entrance. After all, you've learned that brothel visits are only the appetizer. Eavesdropping is the main course. Night deepens into something darker than Venetian lacquer. You decide your next stop is the apothecary, because what's a brothel saga without some herbal aid to soothe both body and conscience? The apothecary's shop is a cramped grotto of dusty jars, dried herbs, and the unmistakable aroma of humility. The proprietor, a one-eyed man with a beard that could double as a paintbrush, greets you with an arched brow. "Back for more, signore?" He raspily inquires, as if your shameful purchases are the city's best-kept secret. You nod, pointedly ignoring the quip about your ever-present headache. "Something stronger than rosemary oil," you murmur, hoping your plea sounds mysterious rather than pathetic. He reaches behind a shelf and produces a small vial of murky liquid. "A tincture for bravery," he declares, wink included. 3 drops under the tongue, and you'll feel fearless enough to duel the Doge himself, or at least flirt without feigning. You pay the exorbitant price without protest. After all, you've already surrendered every scrap of pride to Venice's most sanctioned sins. The vial is so small it could be snubbed by a ladies' fan, but you tuck it into your doublet with renewed purpose. Your next venture is back to La Signora Rosetta's territory, only this time you're not paying for pleasure, you're paying for information. You slip through the scarlet door as if you own the place, greeting the familiar corridor lamps like old friends who've witnessed your every misstep. Rosetta herself lounges behind her desk, legs crossed, eyes gleaming with amusement. "I hear you've been busy," she purrs, tapping a perfectly manicured nail against a ledger. You lean in, deploying your newfound bravery like a cheap coin. "I need to know who's been blackmailing whom and what the Doge really did last Tuesday night." Her smile broadens. "Bold, I like that." Information, however, comes at a price. She names a sum that would feed a family of peasants for a month. You wince but produce the purse of coins you'd managed to squirrel away. Rosetta accepts the payment, shows you a weathered scrap of parchment with a list of names, some powerful, some pathetic, all ripe for scandal. You tuck the list into your coat, feeling the weight of both paper and potential peril. Armed with forbidden knowledge, you slip away into the labyrinth once more. Every shadow seems loaded with consequence, every masked footstep echoing like an accusation. You find a secluded balcony overlooking a silent canal and inspect the parchment by lamplight. Among the names, the merchant who sold inferior olives, the cardinal rumored to keep a mistress in Burano, and a fellow named Giacomo, recognized as the captain of a famed gondola fleet and rumored to prefer clandestine assignations under the Rialto Bridge. Your pulse races. You could use this list to barter for dinner, to secure favor with some ambitious patrician, or to retire early with a modest fortune and modest shame. Instead, you fold the parchment with the reverence of a relic and tuck it into your boots. You're not quite ready to trade your soul, only to display it in full theatrical glory. Night's cloak begins to thin as dawn tiptoes back. You realize that tomorrow you must decide, leverage this knowledge for profit or risk becoming the city's most notorious gossip monger. But for now, you're content simply to watch Venice breathe under the moon, each ripple of water catching silver light like a fleeting memory. You uncork the tincture of bravery, count 3 shakes into your palm, and let the liquid roll under your tongue. There's a bitter kick, like sucking on the rind of a lemon dipped in vinegar, but soon a warm flush spreads through your veins. You stand straighter, chest expanded, as if your doublet has been relaced to fit a new, more confident you. With courage, or at least the tincture's illusion of it, you stride back into the quay. A gondola waits as if summoned by your newfound resolve. You climb aboard, lantern held high, ready to navigate the canals with the swagger of a seasoned Venetian rogue. As the gondolier pushes off, you cast one last glance at the city's glittering silhouette. You realize that this night has revealed more than just the underbelly of licentiousness. It's exposed the fragile tapestry of power, desire, and deception that makes Venice both enchanting and exasperating. And so, dear viewer, as our gondola drifts into the pre-dawn hush, Know that your quest for understanding this Renaissance nightmare isn't over. There are debts to settle, secrets to wield, and perhaps one final confrontation waiting at the edge of the Grand Canal. Buckle up. For part 4, we sail into the heart of price and punishment. But until then, sleep with one eye open and remember, in Venice the darkest waters hide the sharpest knives. Part 4, Price, Punishment, and the Grand Escape. You rise before the sun, the memory of the tincture's warmth still glowing in your veins. The canals are mist-shrouded, the city exhaling an eerie hush that whispers warnings in each ripple. Today, dear viewer, we settle scores and test the limits of Venetian justice, because what's a brothel saga without a reckoning? First order of business, the ledger of debts. You pad down the narrow calla, handbag slung across your shoulder like a soldier's satchel, and slip into the Palazzo Ducale's courtyard. The tax collector stands where you left him, quill in hand, scowling as though you owe him not coins but your very soul. You place the parchment list on his desk, Rosetta's roll call of the powerful, and watch his eyes flick from names to your face. Signore, he hisses, this is dangerous material. He glances around, conviction in his gaze. The Council of 10 does not take kindly to blackmail. Hand it over, and I'll see you prosecuted for sedition. You swallow hard. This, you realize, is the real price of curiosity. If you wield scandal as a weapon, you risk being cut down by the city's hidden blades, but you steel yourself. I came here for truth, you say, voice steady, and I'll pay any price to expose it. He narrows his eyes, then nods sharply. Very well. The council will decide your fate. In the meantime, you're confined to the palace. 2 guards step forward, halberds gleaming. You raise your hands, dramatic, but what else would one do? And let them usher you into a dim chamber lined with barred windows. A single candle sputters in the corner, casting long shadows that tremble like guilty witnesses. Hours stretch into an eternity. You pace the floorboards, clutching your empty purse and replaying every misstep. The scent of damp stone and fear clings to your doublet. You wonder if Rosetta has already launched her retaliation. Hey, perhaps she's accused you of theft, or bribed the physician to label you plague carrier. You stew in paranoia until the door creaks open and the same gaunt collector stands there, parchment in hand, sealed with the council's emblem. Signore, he intones, voice grave. The council has reviewed the list. It seems some names are inaccurate, others blurred by rumor, except for one, Captain Giacomo. He has confessed to patronizing illicit salons under the Rialto and using his gondola fleet for smuggling. The council offers you a choice. Reveal your sources publicly and receive a pardon, or remain silent and face charges of treason. Your heart thumps against your ribs like a prisoner trying to escape. You weigh your options, betray Rosetta and expose Cortese's secrets, or maintain your journalist's integrity and risk the gallows. In that moment, you recall Bianca's laughter, Giovanna's tears, and Klaus's boast about Lucrezia's pipes. You remember the thrill of uncovering Venice's hidden vices, and the dread that accompanied each discovery. You take a deep breath. I choose truth, you declare, but on my terms. I will name Captain Giacomo publicly if the council ensures Rosetta faces due process, and if Bianca and Giovanna are granted protection. You surprise yourself by sounding more diplomatic than drunk. The collector's stoic mask cracks into a thin smile. You are braver than most, he concedes. The council will grant your requests. Prepare your statement. The next morning, you stand before the Grand Council in the Sala del Maggior Consiglio, quill trembling in your hand. A hush descends as you unfurl the parchment. Dozens of patricians in silk robes swivel to face you, some leering, some frowning, all curious. You begin. Honorable members of the Council of 10, Venice thrives on commerce, art, and the delicate dance of discretion. Yet behind closed doors, illusions crumble and secrets fester. I present evidence of illicit dealings. One Captain Giacomo, who using his gondola routes for clandestine liaisons and smuggling. Let this confession be the beginning of transparency in our republic. You pause, heart pounding, as roars of indignation fill the chamber. Giacomo himself stands, face pale as the marble columns, and confesses, tearful, contrite, his sins. He swears he meant no harm, only the pursuit of pleasure mixed with profit. The council debates fiercely. Some demand his exile, others propose a hefty fine, and one elder suggests public humiliation in the Piazza San Marco. After what feels like an age, the podestà pronounces judgment. Giacomo is fined 500 ducats, stripped of his fleet's pearl-white prows, and forbidden to serve as gondolier within Venetian waters. You exhale a breath you didn't know you were holding. Balance, it seems, has been restored, at least on the surface. But as you step out into the morning glare, you realize this victory comes bruised. You're now a known figure in Venetian politics, hero to some, scapegoat to others. Even Rosetta's eyes meet yours from across the square, a silent dare to continue probing. You adjust your cloak and turn away, determined to reclaim your freedom. Next stop, the Brothel district. You stroll down the familiar calle, sunlight dancing off the canal, and slip behind the scarlet door one last time. La Signora Rosetta lounges on her chaise, regal as ever, a glass of ruby-hued liqueur in hand. "Ah, the brave scribe returns," she purrs, setting aside her cup. "I've heard of your little performance, exposing Captain Giacomo. Impressive. But tell me, Signore, did you think to mention my own ledger of clients? The Duke from Ferrara? The Cardinal with the broken vow?" You meet her gaze without flinching. "I had no proof," you reply. "Rumors are not evidence. But this?" You tap your pocket. "Tincture served well, but I've no further use for it." You draw the vial from your doublet and crush it between your fingers, letting the contents drip onto the floorboards. Rosetta's smile falters. "You waste a precious remedy," she murmurs. "It only masks fear," you say. "I prefer to face it head on." She stands, silk cascading around her like midnight waves. "Very well. Consider our business concluded. Your debts are paid and you may depart, with one condition." You brace for another ambush. "You must leave Venice before sundown. If I see you again, I will ensure the council remembers your face for crimes against discretion." A chill ripples through you, but you nod. "Agreed." With that, you step back into the light. The scarlet door swings shut behind you, sealing Rosetta's world away. You navigate the labyrinth of alleys, the city's pulse thrumming beneath your feet. Thoughts swirl. Bianca and Giovanna, what of their futures? You promise protection. Perhaps the council will see that. You imagine them freed from the brothel's grip, forging new lives beyond velvet drapes. As you near the Grand Canal, you pause on a worn stone bridge, gazing at the panorama of towers and domes. Venice sprawls before you, a shimmering maze of beauty and deceit, where every pleasure carries a price. You reach into your pocket for the last denaro, flip it into the water, and watch it vanish beneath rippling waves. In that moment, you realize the true cost of survival in the Renaissance. Not just coins or reputation, but the fragments of innocence you leave behind. Each indulgence carves a scar. Each revelation demands a sacrifice. And yet, you would do it all over again, because history's nightmares are too delicious to ignore. The hour draws near. You board a northbound vessel, trunk in hand, leaving gondolas and masked revelers behind. The breeze carries salt and memory, tugging at your collar as the oars dip into the water. You glance back at Venice, its alabaster walls glinting, its canals swirling like threads of fate, and offer a silent farewell. Soon, you'll share the story with the world, the lure of the red door, the torture of regret, the price of truth, and the sting of exile. It will be a tale of survival, absurdity, and redemption, wrapped in ironic narration, laced with dark humor, and bound by the relentless pulse of history. And as the boat chugs toward open sea, you lean against the rail, wind in your hair, and think, maybe, just maybe, the worst sin of all was ever believing you could escape unharmed. Picture this: a sun so hot it's trying to cook your eyeballs from the inside, dust thick enough to clog your throat, and two men standing 10 paces apart, hands twitching near the grips of their pistols like characters in a tragic opera written by someone drunk on moonshine. One's about to die, the other might miss, and you, lucky viewer, have front row seats to history's most reckless solution to minor disagreements. Part 1. The Deathly Ritual of Pettiness. Let's be clear. Witnessing a duel at high noon wasn't some rare, solemn, honor-bound tradition reserved for kings and philosophers. No, it was basically the 19th century equivalent of two guys arguing in a bar over who could grow a better mustache. except with bullets and blood instead of passive-aggressive eye rolls. The town square, of course, was the stage for these masterpieces of poor impulse control. And on this particular day in July, you find yourself standing in one. The dusty road leading through the main drag of this nowhere town has been swept as clean as a one-eyed saloon keeper's conscience. The locals are all here too, because nothing packs a crowd like the promise of seeing a grown man soil himself before being shot in the chest. It starts early. Dawn breaks. The town rooster screams like it's auditioning for a death metal band, and the blacksmith's boy runs from house to house whispering, "Duel at noon," between Hank and Elias, over that poker hand last night. You, because you're either an enthusiast of poor life choices or simply bored out of your skull, decide you're going. By 9, the town square is already thick with bodies. Every seat's taken, folks perched on barrels, the tops of water troughs, even a goat someone dragged in for moral support. The sheriff, who's technically supposed to stop this nonsense but lost control of the town somewhere between his second whiskey and his third illegitimate child, leans against the gallows post cleaning his teeth with a toothpick. You nod to him as you pass. He grunts, probably in approval, possibly just breathing. High noon in a frontier town hits different. The sun doesn't just shine, it attacks. Sweat drips down from your scalp into your eyes, mixing with the fine grit in the air until it feels like someone's sanding your corneas. Flies move in slow, lazy circles around anything upright, and even the town drunk takes refuge under a porch, cradling a bottle like it's a holy relic. And then the contenders arrive. First comes Hank. Tall, lanky, sporting a hat too big for his head and a reputation for cheating at cards so boldly it almost counts as art. The crowd parts as he walks in, giving him a wide berth not out of respect, but so nobody gets splattered when he inevitably takes a slug to the chest. Then Elias, a squat, red-faced man built like a bar brawl incarnate. His shirt's unbuttoned halfway down, revealing a chest so hairy it looks like he's smuggling a badger. His eyes lock on Hank's, and a silence so heavy falls over the square you could hear a tumbleweed think. You take your place along the sidelines, elbowing an old woman for a better view, because hey, life's short and you came for the show. Someone hands you a lemon drop. You have no idea where it came from, but you suck on it anyway. It's sour enough to make your face contract into a shape no human face should make. The sheriff steps forward, arms out, hat tilted back. All right, gentlemen, you know the rules. The rules, for those lucky enough to have never needed them, are simple. Stand back to back. Take 10 paces at the count. Turn and fire. Hope you live long enough to regret your choices. Of course, nobody's ever clear on whether you're allowed to fire before the 10th pace, whether turning early counts as cheating, or if missing on purpose is dishonorable or just good sense. But clarity's for sober people, and there aren't any of those in this town. A volunteer steps up to count. It's usually some kid or ancient drunk too infirm to be considered collateral damage. This time it's old Nate, the town's toothless storyteller and part-time grave digger. He grins wide enough to make you wonder if he's already dug one of these fools' graves. The contenders take their positions. You can feel the tension now, coiling in your stomach like a drunk rattlesnake. The sun's directly overhead, making it impossible to tell the time by shadow, which is exactly why these duels are scheduled at noon, because even God doesn't want a referee. Old Nate raises a hand and starts counting. 1, 2, 3. Hank takes careful strides, dust puffing up at each step. Elias stumbles on 4, mutters a curse, then catches up. The crowd leans in. Somewhere, a dog barks. Somewhere else, a man bets a week's wages on who'll drop first. At 8, Hank reaches for his pistol a hair early. A ripple moves through the crowd. Will he fire too soon? Will Elias notice? Is old Nate even counting right? There's an excellent chance he's forgotten what number comes after 8. 9, the guns are drawn. 10, the shots ring out like the world splitting in half. And here's the thing nobody tells you about gunfights at high noon. They're over before you even realize they started. One shot clips the weather vane. Another takes a chunk out of the water trough. Neither man's hit. Both stand blinking in the sudden silence. The smell of gunpowder sharp in the heat. The crowd naturally erupts into laughter, jeers, and shouts of, "Shoot again, you cowards!" Someone throws a cabbage. The sheriff sighs so hard you can hear it from across the square. Hank's hand is trembling. Elias' pistol misfires with a soft click. It's like watching two men duel with sausages. The spectacle has tipped from deadly serious to tragically comedic in the space of a heartbeat. Eventually, with mutual embarrassment hanging heavier than the heat, both men lower their weapons. The sheriff steps in, declares the matter settled on account of excessive incompetence, and orders them both to buy a round for the town. Hank and Elias glare at each other but nod, because in the Old West, the only thing stronger than hatred is the communal thirst for free whiskey. The crowd disperses, laughing, cursing, and already revising the story into something far bloodier for the next town over. You brush the dust off your sleeves, pop the last of the lemon drop into your mouth, and follow the rest to the saloon. Because if history's taught us anything, it's that no matter how absurd the duel, the real winner is always the man pouring drinks afterward. And as you cross the square, you realize, it's not about the bullets or the bravado. It's about the story you'll tell, sitting by a fire with an audience of drunks, claiming you were there the day two grown men tried to kill each other and both missed by a country mile. That, dear viewer, is what it was like to witness a duel at high noon. By the time the sun dips behind a bleached beige adobe at 3 in the afternoon, the square has transformed into a makeshift carnival of second-hand shame. The sheriff, sticky with sweat and stale whiskey, stands atop a barrel hollering, "Last call for truth or dares." The townsfolk, eager for more spectacle or maybe just more distraction from their own miserable existences, crowd back in, determined to wring every drop of drama from this farce. You slip through the milling crowd, fishing a half-chewed lemon drop from your pocket. You pop it into your mouth for courage, although by now the citrus tang only reminds you of every bad life choice you've ever made. In your periphery, you spot the contenders. Hank, hat askew, sheepishly ordering 2 whiskeys. Elias, nursing a bloody lip, glaring holes in the bartender's jug. Both men look as though they'd rather chew gravel than face each other again, and yet that's exactly what the crowd demands. A scruffy boy scrambles onto the sheriff's barrel. He waves a tattered slip of paper. Announced! A sudden death rematch at sunset. No counts, no rules. Cheers erupt. Someone tosses their hat in the air. A bored goat brays in mock applause. You pinch the bridge of your nose, just when you thought dust storms and misfires were enough for one day. You follow the crowd to the narrow alley behind the saloon. It smells of spilt ale, stale sweat, and something that might very well be the remains of last week's outlaw. The alley's too tight for more than 2 people to stand side by side. Perfect for a duel rematch where no rules means you're free to stab, shoot, or negotiate with interpretive dance, if you like. Hank and Elias stand back to back again, only this time there's no counting, just a guttural nod from the sheriff, who's clearly over the whole affair. At the signal, they spin and charge, pistols flare, Hank's barrel jams immediately. Elias lunges with a blade snatched from a butcher's hook. Hank ducks, trips over a crate, and goes sprawling into a pile of rotting hay. The crowd gasps. You feel vaguely responsible. For a moment, time stretches so thin you could slice it with a pocket knife. Then Elias trips over Hank's outstretched leg, sending both men crashing into the wall in a tangle of limbs and profanity. The knife skitters across the stones. Their pistols clang against iron doors. A silence thicker than molasses chokes the alley. You hold your breath. The goat behind you huffs, clearly unimpressed. Then, as if on cue, both combatants fling themselves apart, panting like starved wolves who just discovered the butcher's door unlocked. They scramble for their weapons. The moment hangs jagged in the evening light, and then, blam, blam, 2 shots ring out. The crowd instinctively ducks and peeks out. Hank's pant leg is shredded, just a grazing shot, but enough to stop him in his tracks. Elias's hat smolders where the bullet punched clean through. Both men freeze, eyes wide as the rest of the miserable film noir playing in everyone's head. Silence. Then the sheriff groans. That's enough. He fires his own pistol into the air. The echo rolls down the alley like a final verdict. Hank and Elias, limbs shaking, realize they're alive. Miraculously, painfully, undeniably alive. They collapse side by side, chest heaving, faces streaked with dust and tears. It's the kind of tragic duo no one asked for, but everyone got. A hush falls, then someone throws a blanket over the pair. Because frontier medicine dictates that if you can't fix a problem, at least cover it up with fabric. The crowd slowly disperses, drifting back into the town like wounded birds seeking shelter. You follow the trickle of survivors, blinking in the fading light, wondering if you're witnessing the end or just an intermission. At the saloon's door, you pause, scanning for something, anything, to cleanse the day's spectacle from your soul. A familiar face appears, old Nate, still missing half his teeth, offering you another paper slip. Care for tomorrow's main event? He rasps, eyes gleaming. You shake your head so hard your hat nearly flies off. No thanks, you say, voice rough as gravel. I think I've seen enough small-town valor for one lifetime. Old Nate cackles, tucks the slip away, and disappears into the murk. You step inside the saloon, where the air is cooler and the floor sticky with spilled dreams. You order a sarsaparilla, something sweet and fake, like a lullaby for the battle-weary. As you lean against the bar, you catch the bartender's eye. He slides you the drink and nods sympathetically. Tough day's work, he says. But don't worry, tomorrow the show's better. You raise your glass in a silent toast to every poor soul who ever stood 10 paces apart, sure their pistols would solve anything. You sip the frothy brew, savoring its cloying comfort. Outside, the last light of day bleeds into the horizon, painting the sky the color of old blood. And as you cradle your sarsaparilla, you realize something profound. By sundown, you might just be vomiting up sawdust, but at least you'll have a story worth telling. A story of misfires and mayhem, of goats with zero chill, and of two stubborn egos that refuse to give up, even when logic begged them to. So wipe the grit from your teeth, dear viewer, and brace yourselves for part 3, where we'll explore the aftermath, the mendings, the vendettas, and the one-armed fiddler who's somehow convinced he's the real hero of this twisted opera. Because in the Wild West, the only thing more dangerous than a loaded pistol is a man with nothing left to lose, and a fiddle to prove it. Part 3, Aftermath, Blood Debts, and a Fiddler's Lament. Morning breaks like a boot through a rotten floorboard, and you wake up in a puddle of your own regrets. The air smells like scorched whiskey, stale sweat, and the faint metallic tang of yesterday's misfired dignity. Somewhere out there in the quiet morning haze, the aftermath of yesterday's duel is still hanging over the town like a stubborn hangover nobody wants to acknowledge. You drag yourself out of the makeshift cot you claimed in the corner of the saloon, brushing sawdust from your jacket. The bartender gives you a look like you're the human equivalent of a cockroach someone tried to drown in gin and failed. The room's littered with unconscious patrons, overturned chairs, and a goat asleep in the corner with someone's hat on its head. It's barely sunrise, but there's already a gathering down by the gallows. Word travels fast when blood's involved, even if no one technically died. The town council, an esteemed body made up of the blacksmith, the barber, and old Nate, is convening to decide what to do about Hank and Elias, not because they care about law and order, but because both men's families are already placing bets on the rematch. You wander over, partly out of morbid curiosity, partly because you're too broke to skip any free entertainment. The townsfolk are buzzing like a swarm of flies with trust issues. The consensus seems to be that it ain't proper for two grown men to shoot wildly into a public space without a permit or at least a halfway decent aim. Old Nate waves a crumpled piece of paper like a preacher holding scripture. I say, he declares, voice cracking with excitement, that we settle this once and for all with a grand contest. Not a duel, mind you, not after yesterday's embarrassment, but a man's game, a trial of grit, skill, and intestinal fortitude. The barber scratches his stubbled chin. Like what? Nate grins toothlessly. Drinking contest. The crowd roars in approval. You sigh so hard your soul almost leaves your body, because this is how it always goes in towns like this. One moment you're watching men attempt mutually assured destruction with firearms. The next you're betting on who can drink 2 pints of snakebite without vomiting into a boot. By midday, the saloon is packed again. Hank's arm is in a sling. Elias's lip is split and crusted with dried blood. Neither of them can walk straight, but they're upright enough to hold a glass. The sheriff sits in a corner with a ledger, ready to record the outcome for posterity, or as much posterity as you can manage in a place where records are kept in the form of increasingly inebriated oral tradition. The fiddler's there too, a stringy, one-eyed man known only as Blind Calvin, though everyone knows perfectly well he can see out of one eye and most likely uses the blind bit as a way to duck debts. He sits by the window, sawing away at a violin that looks like it was fished out of a pond. Every note he plays sounds like a cat arguing with a fence post. "Y'all ready for glory?" The bartender bellows. The crowd howls, the goat bleats, a baby cries somewhere. You briefly contemplate riding the next stagecoach out of town, but you know you won't, not before seeing how this ends. The contest begins. 2 pints, snakebite whiskey. Rules are simple: drink fast, don't puke, don't die. Hank and Elias each take their first glass, hands shaking, sweat slicking their brows. The room falls silent, save for Blind Calvin's hellish fiddle tune, which sounds increasingly like the soundtrack to a dying relationship. First glass down. Hank winces, Elias belches loud enough to startle a chicken outside. The second glass is poured. You lean over to a wiry farmer beside you. "What's in the snakebite anyway?" He shrugs. Mostly kerosene, some rye, and a dash of rattlesnake venom. Builds character. Second glass down. Hank slams his glass onto the bar with a wet thunk. Elias follows a second later, eyes swimming, cheeks turning a color somewhere between old ham and defeat. The room waits. Nobody breathes. Hank sways, grabs the bar, and lets out a burp so foul it peels paint off the wall. Elias's eyes roll back, his face goes pale, and down he goes, dropping like a sack of wet laundry. The crowd erupts. The sheriff yells, "Victory for Hank." Coins change hands. Blind Calvin launches into an off-key victory jig that might technically be classified as music in 3 neighboring territories. But before you can slink away to enjoy a quiet evening wallowing in secondhand embarrassment, there's a shout from the doorway. A tall, shadowy figure steps in, dusty duster coat, hat pulled low. A stranger. The entire saloon quiets. Even Blind Calvin's fiddle drags to a halt. "Which one of you cowards calls himself Hank?" The stranger drawls. The room parts like the Red Sea. Hank, pale and woozy, raises a trembling hand. That'd be me," he croaks. The stranger tips his hat back. His face is weather-beaten, lined by too many duels, too many miles, and too little sleep. "You shot my brother last week in Dry Creek," he says, voice like gravel in a tin can. "I'm here to collect." The room collectively winces. The goat makes a small noise of concern. Hank, drunk and full of bravado that comes exclusively from surviving idiocy by accident, straightens his shoulders. I'll meet you at noon. Tomorrow." The stranger narrows his eyes. "I ain't waiting till noon." And just like that, pistols flash. 1 shot, 1 man down. But it ain't Hank. It's the stranger. Drops like a marionette with its strings cut. Turns out Hank's one talent in life is dumb. Impossible luck. The sheriff groans. Not again. The townsfolk blink. Blind Calvin resumes fiddling. And you, dear viewer, finish your drink, tipping your hat to the kind of absurd, bloody, dust-choked mess history loves to pretend was about honor and justice, when really it was about liquor, bad aim, grudges, and poor decision-making at high noon. And just like that, you realize, this day ain't done with you yet. Part 4 is coming next. The burial, the ballads, and the town-wide drunken wake that somehow devolves into a pie-eating contest turned fistfight. Because in the Wild West, chaos doesn't wait for an invitation. It just kicks down the door and orders a whiskey. Part 4. Burial blues, ballads, and the bacon crunch. Pie fistfight. You awake the next dawn feeling like you were trampled by a herd of drunken buffalo. Your mouth is a desert, your head a battlefield, and your soul still replaying yesterday's bullet ballet in dusty, slow-motion loops. But there's no time for self-pity, even if your liver could have used the memo. Because the town has decided to turn tragedy into a spectacle worthy of its own carnival ride. By sunrise, every respectable citizen, and handful of goats with questionable citizenship, has gathered behind the saloon for the burial. The makeshift corral is repurposed as a graveyard. A fresh hole yawns beside a weathered tombstone that reads, "Here lies unnamed stranger, died of poor timing, 1884. The stranger's body, swaddled in a dusty sheet, lies on a plank bier held aloft by 2 mourners whose arms shake worse than a prospector at his first sarsaparilla. The pastor, who, rumor has it, once got concussion from a falling hog, steps forward. He offers a sermon so brief even Noah's dove would have had time to circle the ark twice. Life's fleeting, he intones. Death's final. He pauses for dramatic effect that lingers like spoiled whiskey. And sometimes you take a bullet while minding your own business. He shrugs and motions to the grave. Amen. A single shot rings out. Pop. Not from any gun, but from Nailhead Ned's own pocket pistol, which he forgot he carried. The crowd flinches collectively. Even the goats shift uneasily. Everyone laughs, because if you can't laugh at near death at your own funeral ceremony, you're probably dead inside. With that, the men lower the stranger into the dirt. One pats the coffin lid and whispers, "Rest easy, brother. Tomorrow, they'll all forget you existed." The crowd nods solemnly, then turns as one toward the open air at the back of the lot, because naturally, a funeral in this town mandates an immediate wake. The wake of wild contradictions. The wake is a merry contrast to the funeral. Tables laden with salted beef, charred cornbread, and enough pickled eggs to sink a riverboat. A coarse wooden keg with a spigot the size of a thumb stands at one end, pouring cheap rotgut that tastes like old rope and regret. Children dance in the dust to Blind Calvin's funeral march turned jig, while older folk trade stories of misfired bullets as though they were badges of honor. You maneuver through the throng, grabbing a hunk of cornbread. It's so dry it could double as tinder, but you chew it anyway. It's sustenance in a place where calories come cheap and taste comes expensive. You wash it down with a swig from the keg, which hits your belly like a buzzard diving on carrion. At the center of the gathering, the barber is carving a hasty wooden cross for the stranger's grave, in memory of one who knew too little to duck. He's whittling away with dedication only matched by a man who's been denied his morning coffee. You sidle up and ask, "Planning to put the cross up today?" He snorts. "By sunset, if these drunks don't use it for a limbo stick first." He grins, revealing a row of teeth that looks like an uneven picket fence. "Besides," he adds, "the real memorial's the scars left behind." It's true. You see scars everywhere. The red smear on Hank's shirt where the bullet nicked him, Elias's stiff arm in a sling that'll probably set crooked for life, and the bartender's knuckles raw from settling one too many brawls since the rematch. Everyone here wears their wounds like medals, proof that survival in the past was painful, absurd, and often hilariously close to death. The Ballad of the Bullet Brothers. No wake in this town is complete without a musical tribute, so Blind Calvin takes his stage, a splintered barrel turned upside down, and limps toward his fiddle. He clears his throat, tunes the two remaining strings that still hold pitch, and announces, "Ladies and gentle-sirs, I present the Ballad of the Bullet Brothers." He begins with a mournful drawl, each note wobbling like a drunk's gait. Oh, they stood in the alley with hatred and pride, 10 paces apart with fate on their side. One man with cunning, one man with grit, both nearly dying, but neither quite hit. The crowd hums along, some tapping boots, others raising mugs in time. The verses weave a tale of Hank and Elias, the poker hand that birthed a feud, the first duel's comedic misfires, the drinking contest that crowned a champion, and the shadowy stranger whose bullet buried his own bravado. Blind Calvin's bow screeches toward the end, and you swear you hear the goat's bleating harmonies in the background. When the final chord quivers away, the crowd erupts, cheers blending with clinks of tin cups. Hank and Elias, each hobbling to the makeshift stage, bow to the applause. They're grinning like fools who just survived the world's worst theater. You catch their eyes, both nod toward the kegs, tacit agreement that this show's encore takes place at bar stools. From mourning to mayhem, the pie-eating fist fight. Just when you think the wakes reach peak absurdity, someone wheels in a wagon stacked with pies, apple, blackberry, and something suspiciously labeled meat surprise. The butcher challenges Hank, and Elias to a pie-eating contest for charity. The loser donates 10 pounds of salted beef to the widow down the road. No one is certain why a pie-eating contest follows a funeral, but tradition in this town means never letting context spoil a good competition. Hank slaps a napkin on his lap. Elias ties a bandana like a champion. You take your place as an unofficial judge. Someone's got to record the chaos. Blind Calvin, always the opportunist, swaps his fiddle for a spoon, announcing, "Gentlemen, ready, set, feast." The pies vanish with alarming speed. Crusts crumble, fillings splatter, and faces turn every color from flushed red to mottled blue. Hank's left eye twitches from the berry stain. Elias's nose drips gravy. The crowd roars. Children dive in, snagging scraps. Goats sneak bites. Amid the frenzy, someone bets a horse on Elias. Someone else bets 2 goats on Hank. Then, like a fuse reaching its end, tempers flare. Elias's elbow flicks a splat of filling into Hank's eye. Hank retaliates by shoving the butcher's best salted beef into Elias's mouth. Meat and pie mix into a grotesque stew. The crowd gasps, then cheers. A brawl erupts, mugs fly, stools topple, and the goats panic, scattering into the dusty streets. You duck a flying crust. Someone's spoon whizzes past your ear. The bartender rips off his sleeves, fists raised, ready to restore order. But the sheriff, lounging on a barrel with a lazy grin, raises a hand. "Let him have at it," he bellows. "Consider it a rollover from the duel." For the next 10 minutes, the saloon transforms into a circus of flying pastries and flailing limbs. You dodge a fist, sidestep a pie plate, and marvel at the spectacle. Men slugging it out for charity, goats munching on gravy-soaked wood, and blind Calvin leading the chaos with a triumphant fiddle riff played on the barrel's rim. Finally, Hank and Elias collapse in a heap, laughing between gasps. They shake hands, friendship forged in flour and fury. The crowd parts to let them pass, handing out towels and water. Someone presents them with a makeshift trophy, a pewter mug dented in all the right places. They raise it high, saloon champions, survivors of bullets and banquets alike. Saddle up for the next foolish tale. As dusk settles, you pocket your last lemon drop and take one final look at the scene. Tables splintered, floors slick with pie and blood, and 2 men sitting shoulder to shoulder, bruised but beaming. The goats wander back in, casting suspicious glances at the wreckage they helped create. You tip your hat to the bartender, who's already cleaning up with the enthusiasm of a man who knows tomorrow brings fresh trouble. "What's next?" you ask. He shrugs, polishing a glass until it shines like a mirror. "Next week, who can outrun a runaway wagon? Spoiler, it's probably the goat." You laugh, spit out a bit of crust stuck to your tongue, and tuck your notebook away. Because if there's one lesson you've learned from witnessing a duel at high noon and surviving the funeral wake, the drinking contest, and the pie fight, it's that history's nightmares are best served with a side of absurdity and a hefty gulp of danger. So, dear viewer, as you click away and dim the lights, remember, the frontier's not just a place. It's a state of mind where every sunrise could be your last punchline. And if you ever find yourself face to face with pistols, pastors, or pie, just hope your aim is as bad as theirs, and your appetite far worse. Imagine waking up in the darkness, your wrists chained, your ankles blistered, and the smell. Oh, the smell, like a rotting fish, had an argument with a sweaty goat, and they both died. You're half naked, sitting shoulder to shoulder with 100 equally miserable souls, and just as you open your mouth to scream, a whip cracks in the gloom. Welcome aboard a slave galley in ancient times, where personal freedom means you might still have one of your teeth left by sunset. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Part 1. Welcome aboard, you lucky bastard. Let's not sugarcoat it. Being forced onto a slave galley wasn't a minor inconvenience like missing your favorite toga party. No, it was a one-way ticket to physical annihilation, a front row seat in history's most underfunded, least hygienic floating death machine. And the worst part? You didn't even need to commit a crime. Ancient navies were equal opportunity when it came to destroying lives. Captured in war? Congratulations, you're rowing. Accused of theft? Rowing. Couldn't pay your taxes. Guess what? That's right. Rowing. Hell, you could just be the unlucky guy wandering too close to a port city at the wrong hour, and the next thing you know, a sack's over your head and you're shackled to a bench. And if you thought your suffering was going to be neatly documented in some heroic epic, think again. Ancient chroniclers weren't exactly out here writing stirring ballads about nameless slaves drowning in their own filth, which means if you died, and spoiler alert, you would, history wouldn't even blink. You come to on the lower deck of a trireme, a type of galley so claustrophobic it makes a coffin look spacious. It's called a trireme because there are 3 banks of oars. That means you're either on the top, where you get a bit of stale air, the middle, where you smell the sweat of the man above you, or on the bottom, where you become intimate with every bodily fluid known to man. Naturally, you're on the bottom. It's dim, lit only by oil lamps that seem to burn fish guts instead of oil. The air is so thick you could bottle it and sell it as essence of human despair. Around you, men are chained to their benches. Some are wide-eyed, some already broken, others muttering prayers to gods who clearly stopped taking calls from galley slaves years ago. Then comes the drum, a booming, soul-flattening thud, not some elegant percussive flourish, but a cruel, monotonous beat. Boom, boom, boom. Every strike signals a pull of the oars, and every missed stroke earns you a lash across your already half-flayed back. The overseer, a man who likely failed out of psychopath school for being too enthusiastic, paces the aisle with a whip so stained it's turned a permanent shade of misery. Row, row, row. It doesn't matter if you're tired. It doesn't matter if your shoulder feels like it's being torn apart by rusty fish hooks. The galley moves because you do, and if you don't, you're dead weight. And dead weight here isn't a metaphor. It's what they call you before they toss your body overboard. The rowing itself is an act of pure mechanical horror. Each oar is a monstrous length of waterlogged wood, heavy enough that you'd have trouble lifting it on dry land. Here, you're expected to haul it hundreds of times an hour, in perfect unison, or else. And then there's the chain. Oh yes, every man's ankle is shackled to a ring bolted to the floor, meaning that if the ship capsizes, you're going down with it. Not that drowning would be the worst fate at this point. By your 2nd hour rowing, you start mentally ranking deaths in order of desirability. Drowning takes the top spot. Eaten by sharks? Solid number 2. Mauled by a rogue sea turtle? Honestly, you'd take it. Food? You'll get a slurry of barley paste so bland and colorless it makes gruel look like haute cuisine. It's delivered in communal troughs because utensils were apparently too luxurious for the doomed. Water comes from barrels that may or may not have a dead rat floating in them, and the rations are portioned just generously enough to keep you alive for another day of back-breaking misery. Sleep? Forget about it. There's no room to lie flat, no bedding, and the air is so foul you're constantly half suffocating. Every surface is slick with sweat, blood, or worse. The scent alone could peel paint off marble. If you're lucky, you pass out from exhaustion long enough to dream of being somewhere else. But odds are good you'll be jolted awake by a fresh lash, or the man beside you vomiting onto your feet. And then comes the storm, because nothing says ancient maritime hell like a good old-fashioned tempest. The drumbeat speeds up, the overseers scream, and the oars must keep turning lest the ship capsize. The wind howls like some furious god finally noticing your existence just long enough to make it worse. Waves crash through the open hull slats, soaking you in frigid salt water, stinging every wound like liquid fire. The guy beside you has a broken wrist? Doesn't matter. He's lashed to his oar. He can scream until his throat shreds. The oar must keep moving, and if he can't, they'll unchain him, drag him out of his seat, and toss him overboard mid-storm like a moldy potato. Replacement? There's always someone else. Probably you. By the time the storm breaks and the sky clears into some mockery of serene blue, you're soaked, frozen, and more salt than man. The sun beats down, baking the lower decks into a human sauna thick enough to eat with a spoon, and that's day 1. Because, my friend, no one signs a 1-day contract on a slave galley. You're here until you die, escape, or the ship sinks. And considering escape means somehow swimming to shore in full chains while dodging sharks, let's just say you shouldn't hold your breath. Not because it's impossible, but because someone already stole the last scrap of hope you had the moment you set foot on this damned ship. Part 2. Chains, cholera, and the delights of nautical torture day. 2 dawns with the elegance of a rusty guillotine. You're still shackled to the bench, because apparently ancient Rome's idea of comfort was cold iron and 0 legroom. And the morning light streams through the hull, grating like a cosmic spotlight on your misery. Your joints crack in protest when you shift, your back protests louder, and that persistent drip, 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 somewhere above you signals another poor soul vomiting over the deck. It's the ocean's version of good morning. breakfast of champions or condemned men. If you hoped yesterday's barley paste could be upgraded, think again. Today's ration arrives in a wooden bowl that's barely cleaned from the last feeding. The paste itself wobbles dangerously, part porridge, part papier-mâché, and tastes like it was mixed by a man who hates you. The water bucket, half filled with murky brine, offers no consolation. You swallow greedily, praying it's not harboring zoos worth of bacteria. Across from you, Gaius, your bench partner, a dislocated shoulder veteran, mumbles, "At least it's not snakeskin stew." He's half joking. You glance down the corridor. Somewhere, a loud crash followed by a metallic clank suggests the cook's culinary experiments are ongoing. Mutiny over dinner isn't unheard of. After all, desperate men will drown themselves for a crust of bread. Master and overseer, a love story. Within minutes of breakfast's end, the overseer arrives. He's an enthusiastic chap, perpetually 3 lashes away from overcooked glee. His flogger, an ingenious tool of torture made from braided leather and fish bones, swishes through the air as he surveys the benches. One man's foot dips toward the oar's path. "Slip in your stroke," the overseer snarls. The whip cracks. The victim yelps. Lesson learned. No respect for artistry here. It's a performance of power. The overseer's grin stretches wider than a Colosseum turnstile. He seems genuinely surprised when you don't applaud. You steel yourself. Better to row in agony than to find out just how fish-bone-like the whip tips can be. The lull before the storm. Literally. Hours pass in a brutal cycle of rowing and rest. When you're not pulling the oars, you're chained and forced to sit so rigidly you'd think you were carved from stone. Rumors swirl of an impending storm ahead. Tidal boffins in the nave arch's cabin have apparently consulted the entrails of an unlucky gull. You've seen what storms do to galleys. Turn armor into flotsam, turn men into minnows. But for now, the sea is a lazy mirror, mocking you with its tranquility. You steal glances at the horizon. A pod of dolphins arcs nearby, their sleek bodies shimmering like taunts. Do they know your fate? Do they pity you? Or are they just hungry? You'd offer your leg chain for a quick bite of seafood, anything to distract from the ache in your shoulders. Disease, the unofficial third bank of oars. By midday, whispers turn into coughs. A rattling, phlegmy serenade greets the deck, courtesy of respiratory infections enabled by damp wood, close quarters, and zero sanitation. You choke on your own spit as Claudius, 2 benches down, hacks so violently his chains jangle in time. A guard tosses him a cup of water, so filthy it looks like it's been recycled since Julius Caesar's campaigns. Claudius coughs it back in the guard's face, then coughs some more. You consider volunteering for the galley's makeshift infirmary, just to get away from the oars. But no, the infirmary is a row of benches where dying men go to prove they're more trouble than they're worth. After sundown, they're unshackled, because dead men don't row, and gently deposited overboard. Congratulations, they get an aquatic burial and bonus shark bait. Lessons in hypocrisy. A Roman trireme, you learn, is a floating testament to contradictions. It boasts state-of-the-art bronze rams at the bow, designed to puncture enemy hulls with surgical precision. And yet, the poor souls powering it can't even puncture a meal tray without risking a flogging. The navarch and his officers dangle luxury. Fresh figs, fine wine, perfumed oils. They lounge on the upper deck, watching you toil like lab rats on oars. And when they descend, it's to pee on your bench as marine fertilization. You're not sure which is more degrading. Halfway to hell, the midpoint of misery. By late afternoon, you reach the dreaded third bank, the bottom level, where air is a myth and the only view is someone's butt cheek an inch from your nose. Here, you trade misery notes with 2 Cilician pirates captured the week before. They're surprisingly cheerful, swapping stories of past hijinks. One claims he once held a Roman governor hostage for 3 days using nothing but a rusty spoon. You envy his knife-edge gall. You fantasize about using your hands, if only your shackles would cooperate. Your hands are raw from gripping oar handles, your back is a mosaic of bruise and scar, and you've begun to differentiate the sweat of fear from the sweat of exertion, though it's all equally salty. Your mind starts an unsolicited highlight reel, being shoved from the dock, waking up shackled, staving off oysters for dinner, storms on the horizon. Surely there must have been a better Saturday somewhere in history. Nightfall in the galley's lullaby night comes without ceremony. Lanterns flicker, casting choir of the damned silhouettes across the planks. The overseer sleeps in a hammock strung above the benches, snoring like a collapsing amphitheater. For perhaps the first time, the drum falls silent. You exhale a lungful of surprisingly fresh air, just for a moment. Then the real soundtrack begins. The creak of wood under tension, the murmur of lapping waves against the hull, the distant groans of men succumbing to exhaustion or disease. Your thoughts spin like a broken rudder. Will tomorrow bring land? Or more of the same? You clutch your chains and drift towards sleep, each breath a wager between hope and despair. Coda, the price of existence at sea. As you lie there, half slumbering, you realize this ordeal isn't just physical torture. It's an exercise in eroding every piece of your identity. You're no longer Marcus the baker, Flavius the grain merchant, or Lucius the reluctant volunteer. You're ore fodder, half human, soon forgotten. The galley's purpose is to break you down until nothing remains but the muscle memory to pull an oar and the fear reflex to stand back up when you're given a lash. But even as your eyelids droop, a stubborn spark refuses to die. Somewhere in the vast darkness above those slats lies the sky you once knew. Somewhere, beyond these chains, the world continues, despite your absence. And that thought, small as a flint spark under a rainstorm, is enough to keep you rowing. Tomorrow, if tomorrow comes, you'll fight cramps, disease, and despair once more. You'll row through storms, starve through rations, and face the overseer's whip with the same grim resolve. Because here's the truth of surviving a slave galley. The only thing more essential than strength is the will to endure. And somehow, against every ancient decree, you're still here. Part 3. Revolt, shore breaks, and the taste of salted freedom. Day 3 dawns on a horizon that gleams with cruel promise. Through the slim slats above your oar bench, you glimpse a thin ribbon of land, your first sight of shore in what feels like an eternity. Your heart leaps only to be flayed by the drum's thunder. Row, row, row! The Navarche's orders ring like a death knell. You're not pulling into port as free men, but as condemned cargo. The whiff of rebellion, whispers swirl in the lower decks like a school of desperate fish. We mutiny at first light, growls Rusticus, a former legionnaire with one good eye and twice as many scars. We take the oars ourselves, break the chains, rise up. The notion ignites something wild in your belly. You imagine snapping iron cuffs with bare hands, flooding the deck with a tide of angry slaves. And for a moment, the possibility tastes sweeter than any fig. But then the overseer's silhouette appears at the grating, whip in hand, eyes scanning. Chains rattle as the men freeze, fear folding over you like damp canvas. Revolt means the galley's chain pumps you into the sea or onto the rack above decks. Still, you steal glances at Rusticus. In his gaze blazes both fury and fragile hope. You vow silently, if swords cross, you'll stand at his side. Beached and betrayed. By midday, the ship's prow grinds onto rocky shore. The clash of hull on reef is a jarring snarl. Less triumphant arrival, more wounded beast dragging itself ashore. The officers climb down first, sandals clicking on wet stones. They sniff the air, liberty for them, dread for you. One by one, you're hauled from your bench, legs trembling under the weight of expectation and rot-gut barley paste still roiling in your gut. You stumble onto the sand, chains clinking in a discordant melody. Above you, seagulls wheel, unimpressed by human misery. The breeze tastes of salt and freedom, but it also carries an undertone of nails on wood. The stockades timbers behind the officers' camp. The market of flesh. Beyond the officers' tents sprawls a bustling slave market, pitiless even by port standards. Merchants in dyed tunics prod you like livestock. One bronze-skinned trader hefts you by the chin, inspects your teeth, then gestures to a scribe who jots your details. Height, strength, and how many lashes you survived. You're prodded along a line of grim-faced captains, each evaluating which bench you'll row next, if you row at all. A young Greek noble sneers as he runs a finger along your scars. Good arms, he muses in a sing-song accent. Suitable for a trio kafala, 3-man oar, yes? 3 men chained to one oar, the ultimate demotion. Your chest tightens at the thought of sharing sweat and spit with 2 strangers, but you recognize him. You rode alongside him yesterday. You force a nod. His purse jingles, ink meets wax. You're sold, branded and numbered. At the back of camp, you're marched under a crude wooden archway where a torchbearer sears a brand into your shoulder. Galley 7, Bench 3. The burn stings like Poseidon's trident, the smoke a fiery salute to your new identity. Property, engine, expendable. You stagger past rows of newly arrived rowers, men of every tongue and tribe, each bearing fresh wounds and desperation etched in their eyes. Behind you, a guard snaps your chains shut to the oar. Bench 3 of Galley. 7, your new universe. 2 other men slump on either side, one a Nubian with arms like coiled ropes, the other a Thracian whose broken jaw makes his words gurgle. Neither speaks your language. Together you form a motley triumvirate of misery. Trials of the new bench. Your first strokes in this league of the damned reveal new torments. The Nubian pulls with rare grace, each stroke a rolling wave. The Thracian struggles, blood from his jaw mingling with sweat. You slip, miss your rhythm, and earn a lash so savage it rends your already torn flesh. The overseer's laughter echoes across the water. Learn your place, slave, he hisses. Sun climbs higher. The oars dip, rise, an endless carousel of agony. Salt water stings every cut, turns chains into grinding rasp. Your lungs burn, your arms tremor, yet you row, because the alternative is unshackled death by sword or sea. Surge of compassion, amid the relentless toil, a moment of unexpected grace. The Nubian whispers, endure. The Thracian nods, offering a scrap of dried fish. It's meager, but it's defiance. You share it, your fingers brushing, a silent pact that even here, humanity survives. In that brief exchange, the oar bench transforms from a torture rack into a battlefield of solidarity. The storm prepares to strike, again. By late afternoon, storm clouds gather, ominous couscous of slate and charcoal. The nave arch's horns call all rowers to their posts. There's no rest, no quarter. The oars beat against the sea with fresh fervor as thunder rumbles like the drum of the damned. You sense a second chance at your mutiny dream. If the gale breaks hull or panic reigns, chains may shatter, discipline fracture, but the overseers are ready. They send archers aloft, flaming arrows arc overhead, igniting the mast's rigging in a perverse signal to keep going. Rain lashes your face, thunder cracks like the gods smashing shields. Oars become bullets of wood, the bench a submarine armpit, the sea a living tomb. The deluge in your reckoning, then it comes, the gale's full fury. Waves tower, smashing overboards like iron fists. Your trio fights for each stroke. The Nubian strength surges, the Thracian's rage ignites. You draw on every shard of will left. The chains bite into your flesh, but you row, harder and harder, until you swear your arms will never lift again. A rogue wave sweeps you, Nubian, Thracian, in 3 benches under a curtain of brine. You're locked in a maelstrom of iron, wood, and panic. For a moment, the world tilts. The gasp of water fills your mouth. Salt burns your eyes. Then, by some miracle or curse, you resurface in a pocket of air, gasping, claws hooked on the hull's underside. The aftermath of the storm. When dawn emerges battered and bruised, the galley lies inverted on a reef. The navarch and officers are gone, driftwood ghosts scattered across the deck. The slave benches are half submerged, chains fused to splintered timber. All around, the sea is littered with broken oars, tattered sails, and the groaning forms of men in chains. You, alive, soaked, and no longer chained, Rusticus and the Thracian cling to your sides, blinking seawater like baptism. The Nubian lies nearby, unmoving but breathing. Together you haul yourselves onto a sloping rock. The sun's first rays feel like stigmata of survival. On the reef you raise a trembling fist, not to Rome, but to yourself. Because in the gale's wreckage the chains are gone, the overseer silenced, and the bench lies broken beneath you. Here, at the edge of the world, you taste freedom in every drop of salt on your cracked lips. Part 4. Wilderness, woes, wild beasts, and the bitter taste of true freedom. The reef's wreckage behind you, You squint toward the distant green ribbon of land, a hazy promise of safety that feels both salvation and snare. Your body is a tapestry of bruises, salt-caked wounds, and muscles screaming in tongues you never learned. Yet somehow, the taste of unshackled air fuels you. You and your unlikely trio, Rusticus the legionnaire, the Nubian oarsman, and the Thracian with the gurgling jaw, haul yourselves up the slippery rocks, each step a gamble between salvation and another faceplant into brine. Behind you, the trireme's shattered hull groans like a dying monster, its oars strewn like giant matchsticks across the waves. No overseers, no chains, just the moans of broken timbers and curses of whatever gods remain respectful of the sea. The first steps into the wild. By midday, you've dragged yourselves onto a sandy spit before a dense coastal forest, a labyrinth of twisted palms, thorny underbrush, and vines that look as eager to strangle you as the whip did 2 days ago. The Nubian unsheathes a piece of flint he'd secreted in his belt. He strikes it once, sparks flaring into a small fire. The wind snuffs it out. He tries again. The Thracian, cramps in his arms, flinches at each spark. Rusticus sighs. Wood's damp. We'll need tinder. He tears at his tunic, shaving lint into shreds with his teeth. Within minutes the sparks catch, and you have a flicker of warmth and hope. Around the fire, you sit in a circle, chests heaving, staring at one another as though you've just surfaced from some shared near-death vision. Each of you is a walking epitaph. Rusticus's good eye droops. The Nubian's back is curved like an arch. The Thracian's jaw lolls at an off-kilter angle. And you aren't sure how many ribs you've cracked, but you can feel them grinding when you breathe. Yet a fire at night in the wilderness is a marvel. Heat that doesn't come with lashes, light that doesn't blind, and the chance to finally chew something that isn't barley paste. You rummage for scraps, a few hardened olives from your pocket, some foraged berries that taste like wet chalk, and a scrap of salted fish the Nubian snatched before the wretched cook's experiments began. You nibble in silence, each bite a luxury. Facing the wild's indifference, dawn breaks with a symphony of screeches. Howler monkeys, squawking birds, and something that might be a panther's roar, but also might be a particularly nasty gust of wind. The Thracian yelps and scrambles into Rusticus's arms, which is both heroic and confusing. You nearly laugh until you recall you're armed with nothing but a sharpened rib bone and the ascending sense that every rustle in the undergrowth is plotting your demise. The map in your mind is simple. Head inland until you find a river, then follow it to civilization. Assuming civilization still wants a broken ex-slave lineup on its docks. The journey is a Frankenstein's walk. 1 foot forward, 3 steps back. Thorns snag your skin, insects swarm your sweat. Your garments cling in a sodden, itchy embrace. At midday, you pause beside a trickling stream. Fresh water, almost too good to be true. Rusticus kneels and scoops a handful to his cracked lips. He winces. Salt water seeped into the river. He groans. The others taste it. Agreement, it's undrinkable. You see vultures above, scavengers circling in metallic orbits. They don't care if you're gods or garbage. They simply detect weakness. Each of you feels the weight of 1,000 eyes as you move on. You hack through foliage, every vine a lasso, every root a trap, a beast in the brush. By late afternoon, your progress slows to broken steps. The firewood's gone, the fish scraps long consumed, your spirits as barren as your bellies. Then, a sudden roar, startled yells, a flash of tawny fur and amber eyes. A massive jaguar emerges from the shadows, muscles rippling beneath its coat, teeth bared in a silent snarl. Your makeshift weapons, a jagged rib, a fire-hardened stick, feel laughably inadequate. The Thracian stumbles backward, jaw gurgling in panic. The Nubian scoops a handful of soil and throws it into the beast's face, momentarily blinding it. Rusticus raises his arms, chest heaving, voice booming a challenge in Latin. The jaguar tilts its head, unimpressed by Latin or courage. You lunge with the stick. It snaps on contact. The jaguar lunges. Time dilates. You taste copper, damp earth. You smell sweat and fear. Then, wham! A heavy branch swings from above, catching the jaguar across the skull. It staggers, retreating into the undergrowth with a final snarl. Your savior emerges, the Nubian brandishing a hefty limb he uprooted in one motion. Food for tomorrow. he huffs. You collapse, every muscle unhinged. Rusticus claps him on the back, nearly knocking him over. "You're made of iron," he says, awe in his voice. The Nubian merely shrugs, as if survival were a daily chore. The taste of triumph and desperation. Night falls with a cold that pierces every bone. You roast a jaguar haunch over the embers, the first substantial meal in days. It tastes of savagery and relief. You share the feast in near silence, each crunch of sinew a benediction. The Thracian, trembling, passes around scrapes of meat like sacrament. For a moment, the three of you feel not like escaped galley slaves, but hunters, masters of a small patch of wilderness. Yet the fire's glow reveals worrisome truths. Your supplies are gone by dawn. Your wounds ache with the chill. The path forward is a blank void of endless green. Civilization might loom ahead, but so does every threat the wild can muster. Disease, starvation, hostile tribes, predatory animals, or the recoil of Roman justice tracking escaped slaves. The march toward tomorrow. On day 5, you break camp with a fragile optimism. The Nubian scouts ahead, moving like a shadow, footfalls silent, eyes sharp. Rusticus carries you when cramps seize your legs, his seasoned strength bearing your weight. The Thracian hums a guttural tune, something heroic, perhaps stolen from memories of home. By noon, you crest a ridge and spy the glint of thatched roofs in a river valley below. Smoke curls from chimneys, cattle graze in open fields. People, tiny and distant, walk pathways carved into the earth. It's a vision so foreign you blink as though crossing dimensions. The valley promises bread, bathhouses, perhaps even pardon, or chains. You rappel down the slope on tangled vines, every swing toward civilization a gamble with gravity. At the bottom, you step onto a dusty track. A peasant woman with a basket of olives pauses, squints at your ragged party, and asks in a dialect you barely follow, "Lost? Friends?" Rusticus straightens his torn tunic, body slumping with relief. He raspingly replies, "We seek refuge, and perhaps work." The woman studies your scars and the hardened determination in your eyes. Then, without warning, she hands you an olive, a simple offering that tastes of kindness. Freedom's fine print, word of your arrival spreads faster than wildfire. By sundown, you're escorted to a small manor at the edge of the valley, belonging to a sympathetic landowner who, after hearing your story of galley horrors, offers you food, clothing, and temporary sanctuary. You sleep on real beds, bathe in fresh water, and taste wine that doesn't come with a side of filth. Yet even as you feast, your mind drifts back to the bench, the whip, the storm, and the chains. Freedom tastes sweet, but carries a bitter aftertaste of survivor's guilt. You're free, yet somehow not entirely free of the memories that clung to you like barnacles. Rusticus is given a set of tan sandals and a small stipend to return to Rome as a decorated veteran when they verify his identity. The Nubian, unable to prove his former status, accepts a post as overseer of the estate's granary, wielding authority he once only dreamed of. The Thracian, his jaw still misaligned, takes up as a vineyard laborer, his gurgly voice accepted as local charm. You walk the estate's terraced gardens, every step a reminder of how high those terraces might bury you if the wind shifts. You ponder whether to travel on, seek pardon in the capital, or vanish into the frontier's embrace. Your limbs still throb with memories of oar beats. Every sunset reminds you of the stone bench and the relentless drum. Epilogue, the chains you carry. One evening, as twilight drapes the valley in violet hush, you stand by the riverbank, its gentle current mocking the furious sea that once trapped you. You pull up your sleeve to reveal faded scars, a whip's lash, a branding iron's burn, a jaguar's claw. They're maps of your suffering, road signs of your journey. You dip your fingers in the cool water, a baptism of sorts, and let the flow carry your doubts. Behind you, the estate's lights glow like beacons of mercy. Ahead, the river winds uncertainly toward unseen lands. You close your eyes and exhale the last of your chains, mental and physical. Yes, you've survived the galley's inferno, the reef's wreck, the jungle's wrath, and the shadows of slavery. But survival is only the prologue to living. With the moon rising, you step forward into the shallows, water swirling around your ankles. The chill brings a sharpened clarity. Your odyssey isn't over. Freedom demands courage, resilience, and the willingness to forge a new identity from the ruins of the old. You lift your face to the stars and whisper a vow, to live fully, to honor the fallen benches, and to never again mistake chains for security. The river carries your words downstream, a silent covenant with fate. Because if a slave galley in ancient times couldn't break your spirit, nothing will. Not storms, not beasts, not the weight of history. And so, you walk on, 1 foot in water, 1 foot on terra firma, free at last, yet forever marked by the nightmare you endured. Imagine being trapped behind towering stone walls with nothing but moldy bread, rat-infested wells, and the constant thud of siege engines battering your home like an angry god playing medieval whack-a-mole. You've got no Netflix, no Wi-Fi, and your biggest worry is whether your last goat will starve before the trebuchet shreds it into kebabs. Sounds like a dream vacation, right? Part 1. Welcome to Castle Crunch Time. So you've inherited, or been forced to take refuge in, Castle Ironclad, perched on a rocky hill that's equal parts strategic advantage and wind tunnel from hell. Spring arrives, and with it you're friendly. Neighbor Lord Dastardly decides you owe him tribute year-round. When you decline, he brings over a rolling stock of trebuchets, siege towers, and a battalion of axe-wielding psychopaths. Congratulations, you're under siege. Your first morning in the siege is a lesson in medieval HVAC. You wake up in the barbican beneath an arrow slit, your teeth chattering like broken windmills because nobody thought heating was important when your ancestors built this dump. The wind howls through every crack, carrying snow, dust, and the occasional curse from a defender whose boots are soaked through. You marvel that people survived winters back then, until you remember, they rarely did. Breakfast, you learn quickly, consists of hardtack biscuits so dense they could crack a skull, and pottage that tastes like a vat of boiled twigs. You trade a piece of hardtack for a lukewarm cup of small beer, a watered-down brew that's safer to drink than the well water, which is about 10 seconds away from becoming a plague incubator. The cook, a harried fellow named Gwendolyn, apologizes profusely for the lateness of the meal. It's hard to find fresh ingredients when every farm within 10 miles has been burned to cinders. As you choke down your breakfast, you hear the distant thump of a trebuchet stone landing against the curtain wall. It's not a direct hit, yet, but each impact sends tremors through the keep, rattling shutters, loosening stones, and waking the Lord's prized peacocks who screech like banshees. The garrison scrambles, a handful of professional soldiers and roughly 100 terrified peasants, all armed with pitchforks and false confidence. You're handed a crossbow and a handful of quarrels. Great. No training, a weapon heavier than your life regrets, and you're expected to pick off engineers on the siege ramps. You clamber onto the wall walk, limbs stiff with cold, and take aim at a siege tower edging closer. You squeeze the trigger, mechanism, crack, and the bolt veers off into the sky, landing somewhere in the enemy camp and inspiring a group of attackers to cheer. You dip your head, hoping the walls will swallow you whole. Between volleys, the sustainment crisis becomes clear. The quartermaster, a gaunt man named Roderick, informs you that food supplies are expected to last all of 3 days. Water? Maybe 4, if nobody spills a bucket or the drawbridge mechanism doesn't jam. The latrine is a trough in the bailey, because dingy gutters were apparently the height of sanitation. Disease stalks the people like a second army. Dysentery, scurvy, and a mysterious rash that's spreading faster than rumors of defeat. By the end of day 1, morale plunges below the castle moat. The professional soldiers glare at you like you personally invited this carnage. The peasants cry, beg to surrender, or start looting the castle's valuables in hopes of bribing Lord Dastardly's men for clemency. You patch whipped-together defenses, fill gaps with rubble, reinforce gates with timbers salvaged from the stable, and send a scouting party that returns with frostbite and tales of barbarians sharpening axes in the woods. Nightfall arrives with a false promise of rest. You find yourself crouched in a cramped guard tower, clutching steaming water for warmth, while outside the enemy lights dance like fireflies on the hills. Every 10 minutes you hear the clank of armor from sentries on the wall, the grunt of exhausted defenders, and the screech of wounded beasts. Sleep feels like a luxury from another universe. And then comes the first real fright, a sapper's tunnel under the wall. You hear the muffled thump-thump of pickaxes against stone, like the heartbeat of an ancient demon digging his way in. Archers coat their arrows in pitch. You stand ready with a shield and a torch. Hours of tense waiting follow. Suddenly, the wall shivers as the tunnel breaches. Stones collapse, dust billows, and 10 enemy soldiers pour through the breach, swords gleaming. The defenders cry out. A skirmish erupts in the gloom. You wave your torch, swing your shield, and pray your hardtack. Hardened reflexes aren't too late to save your head. By dawn, the attackers are repelled, but the breach remains. A gaping wound in the wall that invites more carnage tomorrow. The wounded groan, the dead lie among rubble, and the living swear vengeance that will probably translate into more death. Through the haze of smoke and blood, you realize the real enemy isn't just Lord Dastardly's army. It's hunger, cold, disease, the slow suffocation of hope. So, dear viewer, that's what day 1 of a medieval siege feels like. A relentless assault on body and spirit, a test of grit that no modern survival course can replicate. Next time, in part 2, we'll tackle the horrors of starvation, the madness of extended bombardment, and the desperation that drives even the noblest soul to raid the larder for hidden ale. Until then, stock up on snacks and maybe avoid rooftop castles. Your ankles will thank you. Welcome back to the grim enterprise that is surviving a medieval siege. If you thought day 1 was a trial by stone and steel, buckle up. Day 2 plunges you headfirst into the raw horror of starvation, relentless bombardment, and the creeping madness that turns even the sturdiest knight into a panting, paranoid wreck. Morning, the ration riddle. Dawn breaks through the arrow slits like a half-hearted apology. You've slept, or pretended to sleep, in a lean-to of shaky boards near the inner bailey, surrounded by groaning peasants whose nightmares rival this new day's torments. You wake to the clatter of wooden bowls and the sour odor of spoiled cheese. The cook, Gwendolyn, arrives with the quartermaster, Roderick, each carrying the last of the day's meager provisions. 2 mouthfuls of barley gruel, she announces, her voice hollow. The gruel is a tepid sludge flecked with sawdust. Noble lords long ago decreed that crumbly straw would bulk out the porridge when grain ran low. You scoop your portion with a chipped wooden spoon and swallow, each spoonful a reminder that food is survival, not flavor. Roderick steps forward. Bread stocks at half. Meat is gone. We have 1 goat carcass left, and someone's been dipping into the wine cask. His eyes narrow. That would be treason, by the way. A hush falls. Every pair of eyes flits to the wine cask, barrel half drained and guarded by trembling men. You wonder if it would be braver or stupider to slip away at dawn and smuggle a flask for yourself. Midday, rain of stone and cinders. By late morning, Lord Dastardly's engines resume their ceaseless song. You've barricaded the breach as best as you can. Wooden planks, tossed boulders, and the bodies of fallow livestock. Now stone and fire arrows rain from every angle. The trebuchet thuds like a beast's heartbeat. Mangonels spit giant rocks. Ballistas fire quarrels that thump into gatehouses with ear-splitting finality. You return to the wall walk with a handful of scraps meant for repair crews. A stone twice your weight clatters down beside you, sending splinters of masonry raining onto the defenders below. You duck, heart hammering, as a volley of arrows skitters across the parapet. The blacksmith, arms bare to the elbow and face smeared with soot, pours molten pitch down the outer wall to drive back the scaling ladders. Flames lick the stones, smoke billows, and men cough through bandanas soaked in vinegar. Anything to filter the acrid haze. Pilgrim's Peak Tower, a round turret where archers hold up, cries out as its roof collapses under a direct hit. You make a split-second decision. Risk crossing the bailey to reinforce the bastion or let it fall, and hope the inner keep holds. You choose the former, sprinting across broken flagstones as defenders fire crossbow bolts from slits. 1 bolt grazes your arm, drawing a hot line of pain but nothing more lethal. You vault into the tower, finding the archers scrambling to reload. You heft a spare quarrel, right the dislodged windlass bolt, and fire back at the siege lines. Your shot sailing wild but bolstering morale with its sound of defiance. Afternoon, the bleak triumph of scavenging. The bombardment ebbs only to allow the attackers to regroup. You descend into the lower courtyard to join a foraging party sent to scavenge whatever edible debris remains. Armed with rusty swords and empty panniers, a dozen peasants step through the breach. The walls echo with enemy shouts. a constant reminder that death is never far. Inside the breach, you sift through shattered crates and smashed barrels. Broken gourds, spilled grain, and half-rotten turnips are all that's left. You scoop handfuls of dried beans, pockets full of scrawny carrots, and salvage a few hunks of cheese crawling with maggots. Skim off the worst, you tell yourself, and it's a meal. The peasants chant quietly, a ragged hymn of desperation. Eat to live to fight, fight to survive. But on the return path, alarms ring out. Enemy forces have exploited a secondary breach in the postern wall. You hurry back with your meager haul, only to find a company of crossbowmen forcing the gate. Defenders pour boiling oil from murder holes. The iron portcullis clangs down. You hurl your scavenged food at the base of the attackers, a pathetic but symbolic assault. We may starve, but we won't yield. Somehow, it buys just enough time for reinforcements to rally and drive off the invaders. Evening, the appetite of despair. When the foragers stagger back, the cook reluctantly transforms the spoils into a grudging dinner. Bean broth so thin it's more water than substance, maggot-skimming cheese rinds and scorched turnips. You sit in the great hall, once a place of feasting, now reduced to a hovel of shared misery, and eat in silence. Each bite grinds like sawdust, but it fills your stomach. Your fellow defenders wince at the flavors, but there isn't a soul who won't take a second serving if offered. As darkness falls, a cold wind rattles the torch sconces. The chant of watchmen patrols through great corridors transformed into cramped barracks. The latrine trough overflows with the day's waste. There's no time or water to keep branches clear. The stench is a third enemy line. You cover your nose with a burlap mask, praying disease doesn't spread faster than Lord Dastardly's reputation for cruelty. Night. Dreams of escape and madness, sleep, or its mockery, visits in fits. You dream of a river of wine flowing beneath the walls, carrying you away to a land of warm hearths and fresh bread. Then you dream of rats the size of cats gnawing at your boots. You wake with a start to the distant shriek of a wounded man calling for his mother and fragments of his sanity. In the dim light, you write a crude letter. To whomever finds this, know we fought like cornered wolves. If relief does not come by dawn, surrender may be your only path to mercy. You fold it, seal it in a clay jar, and drop it down the well, hoping currents carry it to allied forces beyond the hillside. As you crouch in the guardroom, a veteran knight named Sir Garrick shuffles in, eyes bloodshot. He's been pacing since sunrise, muttering about traitors and curses. He fixes you with a glare. "They'll starve us out," he rasps. "Honor be damned. I'd sooner knit a noose than face another dawn of this torment." The words hang heavy. You clasp his shoulder, sharing the same dread. The turning of the tide, or the desperate gambit. Somewhere before midnight, the trumpet of a scouting party echoes through the fog. Relief? No, just a floated rumor of a relief army trapped by enemy scouts. Hope flares and dies in an instant. Then, a whisper. A group of you volunteers will attempt a night sortie, sneak through the breach, cross the moat, and set fire to the enemy's supply wagons half a mile away. You steel yourself. Sure, it's almost certainly suicidal, but desperation makes cowards into heroes or corpses. You volunteer without hesitation. You and 10 others arm yourselves with daggers, torches, and what little leather padding remains. The breach is perilous. Every foot of ground is booby-trapped or watched by sentries. You wait inside the gloom, listening to every bird call, every rustle of cloth. Finally, Sir Garrick waves you forward. You slip through the breach like ghosts, landing in the void between two worlds. The night air is bitter cold. Your heart hammers so loudly you swear the enemy can hear it. You tiptoe across broken stones, avoiding traps, spiked pitfalls, tripwires, and hidden caltrops. Ahead, a cluster of wagons lies by a coppice. Flames leap from torchlight as you ignite straw. The wagons erupt in thunderous crackles, sparks soaring like vengeful fireflies. Enemy campfires flare in alarm. Sentries shout and scramble. You sprint back toward the breach, pursued by a dozen enraged soldiers. Arrows whistle past, a crossbow bolt grazes your shoulder. You stumble, rise, and dive through a gap in the wall. The moat lies beyond, an icy grave for any who missed the drawbridge. Sir Garrick slams the portcullis behind you, chains rattling into place. The enemy curses echo until the wagon fires reclaim their silence. Dawn of Day 3, a momentary reprieve. By first light, the enemy's supply wagons lie in smoldering ruin. Their siege lines are disrupted, no fresh stones, no extra fire arrows, and no rations for the hungry soldiers at the walls. Lord Dastardly's forces scramble to re-establish camp. Their orders arrive late, his commanders bicker, and the attackers falter for the first time. Inside Castle Ironclad, exhausted defenders emerge bleary-eyed, incredulous that the sortie succeeded. Roderick rifles the larder and uncovers a hidden barrel of wine the Lord squirreled away for desperate times, a vintage now worth more than gold. You raise a cup, clink against your comrades' mugs, and sip the ruby liquid. It tastes of victory, however fleeting. But the brief reprieve comes at a cost. 3 volunteers lie dead or dying, including Sir Garrick, who collapsed by the well after falling on a broken stone. His last words: "We drink to those who died so we might see this dawn," linger on your tongue like bitter herbs. As the sun climbs, you stand on the battlements, surveying battered walls and weary faces. You know starvation will return, siege engines will resume their barrage, and hope will once again dwindle as water levels fall. But for now, you have wine, a reprieve in the enemy's siege, and the knowledge that even in medieval hell, a single act of daring can tilt the scales, if only for a moment. Next time, in Part 3, we'll cover the creeping rot of disease, the agony of water shortages, and the moment when allies arrive or refuse to, and you must choose between honor and survival. Until then, stock your water skins and practice your best battle cry. It may be your last chance to yell it. A network error occurred. Please check your connection and try again. If this issue persists, please contact us through our help center at help.openai.com. Pufftorate, hey guys. Day 3 dawns with a creeping murk that seeps into your bones. Like deja vu, except every morning in this castle feels like a fresh entry in the Book of Torment. You rouse yourself from a fitful doze on the flagstones near the granary. Limbs akimbo, spine pinched into cruel angles by the day's prior toil. Around you, defenders stir. Some clutch patched cloaks for warmth. Others simply stare at the gray sky as if willing it to give better news. The water wasteland. Your first order of business. Water. Yesterday's sortie gave you wine, but today the well's so silted you might as well be sipping mud. Roderick, the quartermaster, greets you at the rim, face drawn in panic lines. "The pulley snapped in last night's bombardment," he says, voice pitched somewhere between despair and resignation. "We have 1 bucket that still works, and only half a dozen full pools of water remain." You swallow hard. 6 buckets. You do the math. A garrison of 200 souls, plus livestock, must survive until relief arrives, or starve. Even if you ration to a pint per person per day, you're months short. The cook flips through her scant journals, calculating chores by candlelight. No baths, no cooking more than once a day, no watering the goats. You imagine the goats revolting, but they're too weak to even stink. So you turn soldier/scavenger/engineer, harnessing the castle's archive of rusted winches and fraying rope. You jury-rig a secondary pulley from the rafter of a collapsed barn in the courtyard. A small team of peasants, motivated by desperation rather than bravery, clambers into the shaft to clear debris. You hold your breath as they descend, picks clinking, boots scraping rock. Each return trip brings a precious drip of water clinging to their ragged cloaks. Proof that ingenuity can triumph over neglect, if only by teaspoon. By midday, you coax 10 more buckets, enough for 1 pint per person, if you distribute with a level of tyrannical precision you never thought you'd possess. As you divvy out the spoils, you deliver the daily water sermon. Drink slowly. No wiping sweat with your sleeve. Share with wounded. You see the fear in their eyes sharpened by 2 days of siege. You know you're all just mules carrying this castle's burden, hoof by hoof. The pestilence parade. With every drop of water precious, hygiene collapses under its own weight. The latrine trough, once an odious nuisance, is now a fulcrum of disease. You glimpse the first signs: blackened gums, weeping sores, fevers flickering like careless candles. Brother Hayward, the garrison's priest, trots through the courtyard wielding a vial of holy water. Blessed, cold, and utterly useless against typhus. He sprinkles it on wounded arms, lips moving in Latin incantations, as if that might seal fate's cracks. In the infirmary tent, a lean canvas cell, Ragged men writhe on straw mats, fever dreams tangling with reality. One man that you know, Thomas the miller's lad, moans for his mother. Another, Dulcinea the baker's wife, lies silent, eyes glazed. The cook stirs a pot of vinegar and lemon peels, an old wives' remedy for infection. But the stew's no cure, only another ration cost. You deliver spoonfuls, each a defiance of your guilt. You shall not starve, yet. Rumor spreads that the enemy's engineers have catapulted plague rats into the courtyard. Disease a siegecraft. Whether true or psychological warfare, the effect is the same. Even the bravest man leaps aside at a scuttling tale. You stand on the wall walk, scanning the ground for Rattus norvegicus, as if one bite might trigger the apocalypse. Every shadow becomes vermin, every scurrying noise a death sentence. The siege, stress, spiral. By afternoon, the strain manifests in arguments. Two peasants brawl over a scrap of meat. A bowman storms off the wall, muttering about lancers' shameless feasting. And the smith threatens to melt down door hinges to barter for better shoes. You referee with the patience of a saint, but your own temper phrase, 2 days of cold, hunger, and endless bombardment have carved hollows beneath your eyes. You realize the mental toll is as lethal as any arrow. To break the tension, you organize a defiant event, a mock archery competition between defenders. The prize? A single loaf of bread soft enough not to crack teeth. You set targets in the inner yard, old mannequins draped in burlap, and let the crossbows speak. The sound of quarrels thudding into straw bales is momentarily uplifting, a catharsis of controlled violence that reminds everyone why they chose arms over surrender, if only for a few minutes. The winner, a wiry sergeant named Brannock, is awarded the loaf and swallows it over 3 hours, savoring each crumb like a sacrament. The midnight tunnel, gamble. As dusk descends, you convene with the castle council, the Lord Steward, the Master-at-Arms, Brother Hayward, and a handful of captains. The consensus emerges. If relief armies won't break the siege, perhaps you can break out. A tunnel, long rumored in the castle's ancient plans, runs from the cellar to a hidden exit beyond the dry moat. It's narrow, unmapped, and rumored to flood with every rainfall. Yet it's your best shot. You choose a small band, yourself, Rusticus, if he still draws breath, 2 scouts and a pair of peasants, 1 cunning picklock, 1 sheepish strongman. Armed with candles, picks, and a stolen map, you descend into the chokehold of darkness. The air is wet, slimy, smelling of decay and centuries-old stone. You wade waist-high through muddy water, claustrophobia nipping at your resolve. Every drip echoes like doom's footfall. At one point, the tunnel opens into a cavernous space where you scrape your head against low beams. Bats swirl overhead, their wings a whisper of flapping death. Your heart lurches when the passage narrows to a crawl. You breathe shallowly, one hand on the wall, one on the pick. The scouts light candles, the flicker reveals a torrent of stalactites, nature's own torture devices. One scout licks his cracked lips. We're nearly there. Another coughs blood. You press forward, every inch a promise of liberty or collapse. Suddenly, the water level surges, rain seeping from above. You dash, boots sending muddy spray, as the tunnel fills faster than your candle's flame can hold. You break through into a narrow slit just beyond the curtain wall, a mere foot wide, 20 feet above the moat's dry bottom. You and your team slip through, bodies pressed to cold granite, and peer into the night. The besiegers' camp lies yards away, torches glowing like predatory eyes. The stealthy recon. For half an hour, you skulk between rocks and underbrush, mapping enemy defenses. You count their trenches, measure distances, and spot the supply wagons locked in rear guard. Rusticus brandishes a scrap of chalk, marking your insights on an upturned shield, while the picklock unsheathes a length of thin wire that might snag a spare arrow. The peasants grin. If we can sabotage those wagons, we might starve them back to prayer. But then, footsteps. A pair of enemy sentries rounds a tent, voices low and unfamiliar. You dive into a bramble patch so sharp you bleed, pressing faces together while arrows whiz overhead. The sentries pass within arm's reach. One even nods as though greeting the wind. You hold your breath until the final echo of footsteps dies. Your team exhales in unison, a chorus of relief so loud it nearly gives you away. sabotage, and scramble. You slip behind the wagons, camouflaged by stacks of hay. The pick lock works on the harness locks. After a nerve-wracking minute, they click open. The strong man yanks free a greased wheel bolt, then tosses it under the wagon. The scouts smear the wheel spokes with pitch stolen from the castle's stockpile, ensuring any rotation will spark and smoke. Finally, Rusticus slashes the supply crate's straps. Sacks of grain and barrels of dried meat spill onto the ground. On cue, you ignite a torch and fling it among the scattered supplies. A ripple of orange flame snatches the hay. Sparks leap onto grain. Soon, the wagons roar like living hell. Enemy shouts erupt. Soldiers swarm with pikes and lanterns, but your team vanishes into the night like shadows. You retrace your steps through the tunnel exit, the scent of burning provisions driving you toward damp sanctuary. Back behind the walls. You emerge near the collapsed barn, mud slicking your boots. The castle's curtained gate opens a crack. Roderick and a dozen defenders waiting to haul you inside. You collapse, gasping like land creatures returned from the abyss. They drag you to the courtyard, where Gwendolyn pours you a cup of water, perhaps the only clean drink you'll have all day. You raise the cup. The defenders cheer, a raw sound stripped of ceremony. The wagon inferno has bought you time. The enemy siege lines falter as soldiers scramble to protect their flank and forage fresh supplies. For the first time in 3 days, cannon fire slows. Arrows fall wide, and the trebuchet rests in uneasy dormancy. You watch the smoke curl above the camp, realizing that sabotage, quiet, deadly, ingenious, can be as potent as any wall or weapon. Nightfall and fragile hope. As darkness settles, you sit among the embers of the burned wagons, tracing your fingers through soot and grit. The castle council gathers to share news. Water restored by the tunnel effort, fresh supplies burned but morale boosted, and relief scouts sighted just beyond the forest's edge. It might be 6 hours, it might be 2 days, but it's coming. You lift your rusted helmet in mock salute. To the foolish few who strike back, you say, "May our folly be rewarded." The defenders clap you on the back, some too weak to stand, others still bleeding from yesterday's skirmish. You share a flask of spiced mead salvaged from the Lord's private stores, just enough to warm your belly and blur the edge of dread. And so, dear viewer, that's the gauntlet of day 3. Desperate water schemes, plague-borne panic, mental fractures, and a midnight raid through damp tunnels. It's a reminder that survival in a medieval siege demands every ounce of cunning, courage, and cruelty you can muster. And then some. Next time, in part 4, we'll cover the relief army's arrival, or betrayal. The final reckoning between honor and surrender, and whether Castle Ironclad stands or falls when all is said and done. Until then, keep your ropes strong, your barrels empty, and your spirit unbroken, if that's even possible behind these walls. Part 4. Relief, ruin, and the bitter aftertaste of victory. Dawn of day, 4 breaks like a promise you'd love to believe. If only your eyelids weren't crusted with grime and your gut didn't rumble in protest. You emerge from the guard room, eyes bleary, to find the courtyard alive with frantic movement. Defenders sharpening weapons, hauling stones back onto the walls, and chattering like starved magpies. The siege engines still loom beyond the breach, but something's changed. Movement on the far ridge suggests a new presence. The distant trumpet of hope, or betrayal. 20 minutes past first light, a horn blasts thrice from the summit of Ironclad's tallest watchtower. It's the code for relief at last, or so you hope. Every pair of eyes swivels toward the forested hill, where scouts reported Allied banners. Within moments, figures emerge, battered but upright, bearing the livery of your liege lord's cavalry. Lances glint in the sun, pennants snap in the breeze, and your heart stutters. For a breathless second, you imagine the enemy ranks wilting under a countercharge, their siege lines collapsing faster than morale in the inner keep. Then the cavalry halts halfway down the slope. Riders lower their heads, boots digging into the earth. Their banners don't waver, they hang limp as though caught in a windless vacuum. A lone rider spurs forward, a messenger, armor dented, cloak stained. He weaves through the outer bailey and plunges into Ironclad's command tent. Letters, lies, and the Lord's dilemma. You slip inside the tent, jostling through captains and clerics, until you glimpse Lord Ironwood himself, a gaunt figure draped in tarnished mail. He's staring at a folded missive, one hand covering his mouth. Finally, he speaks. My liege has sworn fealty to Lord Dastardly. Our relief army stands here to enforce a peaceful handover. Silence crashes through the tent like a ram's head against a gate. The steward sputters, the master-at-arms pales, and Brother Hayward crosses himself as though exorcising evil from the parchment. Peaceful handover, you echo, tasting the words like spoiled bread. So we surrender? The Lord's jaw tightens. Terms: safe conduct for all defenders, preservation of lives, but Castle Ironclad must open its gates by sunset. He glances around, eyes raw. You fought bravely, and I... He closes the letter. I would rather break my sword than these walls, but politics spares no one. The crack in the walls. Word races through the garrison. The castle will fall, but without wholesale slaughter. Some defenders cheer, greedily imagining hearths and fresh rations awaiting them. Others weep, mourning the stones they prayed under, bled for, and nearly died in defense of. You find Roderick at the well, the last bucket dangling empty, and you catch each other's gaze. We built this place, he murmurs. We damned well deserve to empty it on our terms. A council convenes on the inner bailey's raised dais. Lord Ironwood, flanked by the relief commander and your master-at-arms, proclaims the terms: all weapons to be laid down, non-combatants to be evacuated, and a small garrison to remain as hostages, just enough to guarantee good faith. You watch as axes, swords, and crossbows clatter onto the flagstones in a pitiful pile. The clang of metal on stone is a requiem for your stubborn valor. The procession of defeat. At midday, you march out through the breach, now widened into a symbol of surrender, and file toward the relief camp beyond the moat. The enemy's battered tents flinch under the weight of milled troops, but they stand silent, their trebuchets idle. You walk beneath the empty crooks of portcullis spikes, past the collapsed siege tower, and into a field where fresh straw has been laid for you. Dirty children, the same peasants who yesterday carried your water buckets, stumble alongside hardened soldiers, stepping over discarded gavels of war. The relief commander, a stern woman named Lady Celeste, greets each in turn. You fought the good fight, she tells you, voice softer than you'd expect for a battlefield commander. Now rest, recuperate, and swear your oaths anew to the crown. You exchange a weary nod. You've survived arrows, disease, hunger, and the creeping rot of despair. Surrender feels like a bitter pill coated in rosewater. You swallow it, because dying on your feet would have been less humiliating, but also less likely. Aftermath: the Lord's ball, the Lord's lies. That evening, Lady Celeste hosts a provisional court in the castle's great hall, now echoing with emptiness. Bright tapestries flutter in the breeze from broken windows. Burn marks stain the stone. On one raised dais, she examines commanders for commendations and punishments. Loyalists are granted small parcels of land. Cowards get nothing but a penitent's cloak. Roderick receives a brief nod. Your name is mentioned as particularly resourceful, which in noble code means thank you for the water pulley, but next time pick more reliable kings. In the shadows, enemy Captain Lysandros reappears, seeking parley. He places 2 dueling swords at the dais, an unspoken challenge to single combat. Laughter echoes. No one has the stomach or strength for duels after 4 days of famine. Lysandros bows, pocketing the swords. A pity, he says dryly. I would have enjoyed cutting off what little stubbornness remains in that beard of yours. Homecomings and hauntings. By dawn, the majority of defenders have dispersed. Peasants return to burnt farms. Soldiers drift to mercenary banners. And nobles petition for new titles. You ride north with a small escort to your family's ancestral lands, if they still stand. En route, you pass villages scarred by retreating armies, corpses left in hedgerows, and fields sown with weeds. Children gape, mothers cross themselves, and chickens. Well, chickens survive anything. You spend your first night back under a real roof, mattress beneath you, and hearth's warmth chasing away the residue of damp stone. But sleep remains elusive. You dream of trebuchet stones stacking themselves into towers, of well buckets eternally rimmed with rust, and of the cacophony of dying soldiers pleading for more water. Even in safety, the siege remains lodged in your bones. Reflections on the ruins. Weeks later, you return to inspect Castle Ironclad. Its walls stand, scarred but upright, like an old veteran approaching retirement. A small garrison remains, and repairs begin. New stones quarried, burned timbers replaced, and wells dredged. Workmen hum as they rebuild, unaware or unbothered by the specter of past horrors. You walk the wall, walk alone at sundown. The panorama of rolling hills and distant flags under a blood-red sky stirs something in you. Pride, sorrow, and a grudging admiration for human tenacity. You run a gloved hand over a chipped merlin, feeling the grit of mortar and memory. Surviving a medieval siege, you murmur, isn't about winning or losing, it's about refusing to be erased. Epilogue, the cost of survival. You settle in the castle's refurbished solar, your own chamber finally. The steward presents you with your recompense, a modest grant of land and a token chain from the old well pulley, now polished and mounted above the fireplace as a reminder. You hang it with care. That night, beneath a plush canopy that smells of lavender instead of mildew, you write this chronicle. You dust your ink-stained fingers and toast your own resilience. Tomorrow, you'll ride into court to adjust your oath. But for now, you close your eyes, letting the lull of a world that still spins carry you into dreams. Dreams free of stones and starvation, of cannon fire and disease. And as you drift off, you know this. No matter where fate delivers you next, a battlefield, a court, or a peasant's plow, the scars of ironclad will remain. Because surviving a siege isn't just a chapter in history. It's a lifetime tattoo, etched in stone, steel, and the stubbornness of the human spirit.